I stood alone outside the graduation hall, with my gown still creased, and finally understood that some families do not simply forget you. They schedule your erasure. When I read the text message they thought I would never see. I did not cry. I just went cold. The new name I chose later was not just a way to hide. It was the only way to return and ensure they had zero room left to play the victim. My name was Kelsey Hart, and at 22 years old, I had just delivered the most important speech of my life to an audience of 3,000 strangers. I stood on the periphery of the university parking lot, the asphalt radiating the heat of a humid June evening, and stared at the phone in my hand. It was 7:15 in the evening. The ceremony had ended 30 minutes ago. The reception was in full swing inside the student union, a cacophony of laughter, clinking glasses, and the heavy, humid scent of expensive perfume and cheap champagne. I was not inside. I was standing next to my 10-year-old sedan, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. There were 17 outgoing calls in my call log. 17. I had counted them twice to make sure I was not exaggerating, even to myself. The first call had been placed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, just to check on their parking status. The last one had been placed 5 minutes ago. Not a single one had been answered. I looked down at my gown. It was a deep, royal blue, made of that unforgiving polyester that traps sweat against the skin. I had spent 4 years earning the right to wear it. I had spent 4 years pulling all-nighters, drinking stale coffee, skipping parties, and obsessing over half percentage points on my GPA to ensure that I would stand on that stage as the valedictorian. I had written a speech about the importance of community. I had spoken about how no one achieves greatness in a vacuum. I had looked out into the blinding stage lights, shielding my eyes, searching for row G, seats 4 through 8. They had been empty. The emptiness had been aggressive. It was not just a lack of people. It was a physical void that seemed to suck the air out of my lungs. I had faltered only once during the speech. A microsecond of hesitation when my eyes locked onto those 4 gray folding chairs. I recovered. Of course, Kelsey Hart always recovered. Kelsey Hart was the strong one. Kelsey Hart did not need anyone to hold her hand. That was the family motto. Unspoken, but etched into the drywall of our home. I unlocked my car door and tossed the diploma case onto the passenger seat. It landed with a dull thud. It looked ridiculous there. A leather-bound folder sitting on stained upholstery, signifying everything and nothing at all. I got in and shut the door, sealing myself in silence. Driving home usually cleared my head, but tonight the silence felt heavy, like water filling the cabin. I merged onto the highway, watching the red taillights of other families smear into long lines in the twilight. They were going to dinners. They were going to steakhouses or Italian places where fathers would toast their children and mothers would wipe away tears. I was driving to a house that I already knew would be dark. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there had been an accident. That was the first place the mind went. Wasn't it a flat tire? A medical emergency? Maybe Evan had an allergic reaction. Maybe Dad's blood pressure spiked. But even as I thought it, the logic crumbled. If there had been an emergency, someone would have called. If there had been a flat tire, Dad would have texted to complain about the roadside assistance service. The silence was not chaotic. It was curated. I pulled into the driveway at 8 o'clock. The house stood looming and quiet against the darkening sky. The porch light was on. That single, yellow bulb buzzing above the front door stung more than the darkness would have. Leaving the light on meant they knew they would not be home when I arrived. It was a gesture of logistical acknowledgement, not care. It meant they had planned this timeline. I walked inside, the heavy mortarboard cap still pinned to my hair, the tassel tickling my cheek. The air conditioning was humming. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. "Hello?" I called out. My voice died in the hallway. No answer. I walked into the kitchen. It was messy in a way that suggested a hasty departure, but not a panicked one. There was a loaf of bread left open, a knife with peanut butter residue sitting on the edge of the sink, and then I saw the tablet. It was the family iPad, the one Mom used for recipes. and Dad used to read the news. It was sitting on the granite island, propped up against the fruit bowl. The screen was dark, but as I walked past, a notification chimed. Lighting up the display, it was a synchronization alert. My phone, my laptop, and this tablet were all linked through a shared family cloud account we had set up years ago and never bothered to dismantle. I reached out and touched the screen. The passcode was the same as it had been for a decade the year my parents were married. The device unlocked, and it opened to the last used application. Messages. I frowned. I was not in the family group chat anymore. I had noticed that morning that the thread named Heart Family Updates had disappeared from my phone, but I had assumed it was a glitch. I tapped on the sidebar. There was a new thread. It was titled Lake Day Coordination. The participants were Mom, Dad, Brooke, and Evan. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck, the kind of instinctual warning you get before you touch something hot. I should have put the tablet down. I should have gone to my room, taken off the gown, and gone to sleep, but I did not. I scrolled up. The timestamps told a story that made my stomach turn. Mom, 2:30 p.m. Are we sure about this? She might see the empty seats on the live stream. Dad, 2:32 p.m. She will be too busy shaking hands with the dean. Besides, we can say the traffic was a nightmare. Route 95 is always backed up on Fridays. Brooke, 2:35 p.m. If we go, Aunt Sheila is going to have a meltdown. You know how she gets about Kelsey. She's already crying because Cousin Mark failed his GED again. We cannot rub her face in Kelsey's valedictorian nonsense today. It is cruel. I gripped the edge of the counter. Aunt Sheila, my father's sister, a woman who had made a career out of professional victimhood. She lived 2 towns over and treated every success I ever had as a personal attack on her own children's mediocrity. Mom, 2:40 p.m. Brooke is right. We have to prioritize the peace. Sheila has been fragile lately. We will do the lake house with her, keep her calm, and be back by 10. Kelsey will understand. She is the strong one. Evan, 2:45 p.m. She is going to be pissed. 2:46 p.m. She won't notice. She's always too busy being proud of herself. I stopped breathing. I read that line again. She's always too busy being proud of herself. It was not just a dismissal. It was a character assassination delivered via iMessage. It reframed my entire academic career, every late night, every sacrifice, not as hard work, but as vanity. In my mother's eyes, my drive was not a virtue. It was a narcissism that excused her neglect. Because I was proud, I did not need support. Because I was proud, I did not need parents in the stands. I scrolled down to the most recent messages, sent only an hour ago. Dad, 7:10 p.m. Sheila is having a great time. Glad we came. The weather is perfect. Brooke, 7:15 p.m. Did Kelsey call Mom? 7:16 p.m. A few times. I silenced it. We can deal with her drama when we get home. Just tell her the car overheated if she asks. She will get over it. She always does. I set the tablet down gently. I did not throw it. I did not smash it against the wall. Even though the rage boiling in my chest demanded a physical release, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were floating above my own body, watching a girl in a blue graduation gown realize she was an orphan with living parents. They were at the lake. They were eating potato salad and drinking beer on a pontoon boat, careful not to mention my name so that Aunt Sheila would not feel bad about her son failing a high school equivalency test. They had traded my once-in-a-lifetime milestone for a quiet afternoon with a relative who despised me. I looked around the kitchen with new eyes. I saw the preparations they had made before they left. There was a stack of red plastic cups on the counter not for me, but for the cooler they had taken to the lake. There was a bag of pretzels left open, and then I saw the note. It was stuck to the refrigerator door with a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza. It was written in my mother's looping, chaotic handwriting. George, don't forget to buy ice cream for the kids on the way back. Vanilla for Mark. Chocolate for Evan. I stared at the yellow sticky note until the words blurred. They remembered the ice cream, They remembered that Cousin Mark liked vanilla. They remembered that Evan liked chocolate. They remembered the traffic patterns on Route 95. They remembered Aunt Sheila's emotional fragility. They remembered the cooler. They remembered the red cups. They had remembered absolutely everything, down to the flavor of a frozen dessert, except for me. Or rather, they had not forgotten me. That would have been accidental. This was active. They had remembered me, considered my feelings, weighed them against the discomfort of an insecure aunt, and decided that I was the acceptable casualty. They had remembered me enough to formulate a lie about a car overheating. I walked into the living room. I did not turn on the lights. The only illumination came from the street lamp outside, filtering through the sheer curtains, casting long prison bar shadows across the carpet. I sat down in the armchair that faced the front door. I was still wearing my gown. I pulled the robe tighter around myself, the fabric rustling in the quiet house. I looked like a specter, a blue ghost haunting the home of a nice, normal family. I checked my watch. 8:30? If they left the lake at 9. They would be home by 10 or 10:30. That gave me 2 hours. I could have gone upstairs. I could have changed into sweatpants, washed my face, and pretended I was asleep. That is what the old Kelsey would have done. The old Kelsey would have swallowed the hurt, accepted the lie about the broken-down car, and even comforted them for their stressful day. The old Kelsey would have apologized for being difficult. The old Kelsey would have believed that if she just achieved one more thing, won one more award, or earned one more degree, they would finally look at her and see someone worth showing up for. But the old Kelsey had died somewhere between the parking lot and the kitchen counter. I sat perfectly still. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, but not the one they were expecting. They were expecting a tantrum. They were expecting tears. They were expecting me to demand an apology so they could roll their eyes and call me dramatic. I was not going to give them drama. Drama is hot. Drama is messy. I felt cold. I felt like the marble statue in the center of the campus fountain, solid, hard, and immovable. My hand drifted to the pocket of my gown where the medal for academic excellence sat heavy and cold. I took it out. It was gold, suspended on a ribbon of university crimson. I turned it over in my hand. It felt like a prop. She's always too busy being proud of herself. The sentence replayed in my mind, looping like a broken record. Is that what they saw when I stayed up until 3 a.m. studying Pride? Is that what they saw when I took the extra shifts at the library to pay for my own textbooks? Arrogance. I realized then that my competence was my crime, because I did not need them. They resented me, because I did not crumble. They assumed I had no breaking point. They punished me for the very thing they bragged about to their friends when I was not around. They surely told people their daughter was valedictorian. They just didn't want to do the work of witnessing it. I heard the hum of a car engine outside, but it passed by. Not them, not yet. I leaned my head back against the chair. The darkness of the room felt protective now. It was a stage I was setting when they walked through that door, laughing, smelling of lake water and barbecue, secure in their lie. They would find me here. I would not be crying. I would not be screaming. I would just be waiting. I looked at the sticky note in my mind's eye again. Ice cream for the kids. I was not one of the kids. I was the adult they had forced me to become. And tonight, the adult was going to present them with the bill. The 17 missed calls were not a plea for attention anymore. They were evidence. The text messages on the iPad were not just hurtful words. They were a confession. I sat in the dark, my valedictorian medal clenched in my fist, and waited for the sound of the key in the lock. I waited for the performance to begin. At 10:30 in the evening, the front door unlocked with a cheerful, metallic click. I had been sitting in the dark for over 2 hours. The silence of the house had settled around me like a second skin, heavy and suffocating. My eyes had adjusted to the gloom. So when the door swung open, the sudden intrusion of the porch light felt violent. They spilled into the hallway on a wave of noise. My father was laughing at something my mother had said, a deep, belly-shaking sound that I had not heard directed at me in years. My mother was humming, her keys jangling in her hand. Brooke came in last. carrying a cooler and complaining about a mosquito bite on her ankle. Evan trailed behind them, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his smartphone. Thumbs scrolling incessantly, they brought the smell of the lake in with them. It was a mixture of sunscreen, charcoal smoke, and damp towels. It was the scent of a perfect family Saturday, a day spent making memories that I had been specifically excluded from. My father reached out and flipped the living room light switch. The sudden brightness was blinding. I blinked, my pupils contracting painfully. For a split second, they did not see me. They were too busy dropping their bags, kicking off their sandals, and exhaling the satisfaction of a day well spent. Then, my mother turned toward the kitchen and stopped dead in her tracks. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest. I was sitting in the armchair directly facing them. I was still wearing my royal blue graduation gown. The fabric was wrinkled now, damp with the sweat of the parking lot and the cold sweat of my realization. My mortarboard cap lay on the floor at my feet. The tassel spread out like a dead spider. The room went dead silent. The laughter evaporated. Brooke looked up from her ankle. Evan finally looked away from his phone. My father's smile froze, then slowly dissolved into a look of mild irritation, the kind a man wears when he finds a stain on his favorite shirt. Jesus. Kelsey, my father said, letting out a sharp exhale. You scared the life out of me. Why are you sitting in the dark? He did not ask about the ceremony. He did not ask how I felt. He asked why I was inconveniently staging a scene in his living room. I stood up slowly. My legs felt stiff. I looked at each of them in turn. I wanted them to see the gown. I wanted them to see the medal around my neck. I wanted the image to burn into their retinas so that every time they closed their eyes tonight, they would see the daughter they had discarded. I waited for you, I said. My voice was raspy, unused for hours. The ceremony ended at 6:30. I waited in the parking lot until 8. My mother immediately went into damage control mode. She bustled past me into the kitchen, placing her purse on the counter with a loud thud. Avoiding my eyes, "Oh, honey, it was a nightmare," she said, her voice pitching up into that fake, airy register she used when she was lying to neighbors. The traffic on the interstate was absolute gridlock. We sat there for hours. We tried to call, but the service was spotty. By the time we turned around, we knew we would miss the walk, so we just came home. We felt terrible. I watched her unpack the cooler. She was moving too fast. Her hands were shaking slightly. I looked at my father. He was leaning against the doorframe, crossing his arms. He was not even trying to look sorry. Traffic, I repeated flatly. Yes, traffic, my father said, his tone warning me not to push it. Look, Kelsey, I know you are disappointed, but let us be realistic. It is just a ceremony. It is a parade of kids in funny hats shaking hands with old men. You have the degree. That is what matters. The paper is in the mail. The ceremony is just pomp and circumstance. It is not real life. My stomach twisted. He was reducing 4 years of sleepless nights into a trivial pageant. I looked at Brooke. My sister was leaning against the staircase banister, rolling her eyes so hard it looked painful. She was 2 years younger than me and had spent every one of those years resenting the fact that I actually turned my homework in. Here we go, Brooke muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The Kelsey Show, Season 5, Episode 1. You always have to make everything about you, don't you? We have been home for 30 seconds, and you are already sucking the air out of the room. I did not look away from her. I turned back to my mother. I saw the iPad. Mom, I said. The clinking of glass in the kitchen stopped. My mother froze with a jar of pickles in her hand. The silence that followed was different this time. It was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of a trapped animal. I saw the messages, I continued, my voice steady and cold. I know there was no traffic. I know you were at the lake. I know you were with Aunt Sheila. My father's face hardened. He stepped fully into the room, his physical presence suddenly looming. He did not deny it. He did not apologize. He pivoted, instantly changing the terrain of the argument. Fine, he snapped. We were at the lake. Are you happy now? We went to see your aunt. She has been having a hard time. Kelsey, her anxiety is through the roof. Cousin Mark is struggling. Do you have any idea how it makes them feel to hear about your awards and your speeches and your perfect grades? I stared at him, genuinely unable to process the logic. So you missed my college graduation to protect Aunt Sheila's feelings, I asked. We did it to keep the peace, my mother cried out from the kitchen. Finally turning to face me, she looked frantic, her face flushed. You do not understand. Kelsey, you never understand because you are so focused on yourself. Sheila feels small around you. She feels like a failure as a mother because Mark is not academic. If we had dragged the whole family to watch you be crowned queen of the university, it would have destroyed her. We did a kindness. We spared her the pain. I felt like I had been slapped. They had twisted my success into a weapon I was using to hurt my family. In their narrative, I was the villain for succeeding, and they were the heroes for hiding me. You promised, I said. My voice wavered. Just once. 6 months ago, when I got the letter saying I was valedictorian, you sat at this table and promised you would be there. You said you were proud. That was before Sheila's depression got bad. My father said dismissively, Circumstances change. You are 22 years old. Kelsey, you are an adult. Stop acting like a child who needs her parents to clap for her every time she uses the potty. You are supposed to be the smart one, right? Use your brain. Understand the nuance. Nuance. That was his favorite word for excuse. I looked at Evan. My 17-year-old brother was sitting on the sofa now, still staring at his phone. He had not said a word. He had not looked at me. He was the one person in this family I thought actually liked me. We used to play video games together until 2 a.m. I helped him with his math homework. Evan, I asked. He flinched. He did not look up. He just hunched his shoulders, making himself smaller, disappearing into the screen. Evan, tell me you did not know. I said. He mumbled something unintelligible. What I asked. I said, Drop it, Kelsey, he said, his voice low and sullen. Just let it go. It is done. The betrayal hit harder than my father's aggression or my mother's manipulation. Evan's silence was a choice. He had sat on that boat, eaten that ice cream, and watched the clock tick past the start time of my ceremony. And he had said nothing. He had chosen the path of least resistance. He had chosen them. My mother walked into the living room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked exhausted, as if my graduation, the one she did not attend, had been a terrible burden on her. Can we please just eat dinner, she asked, her voice trembling with forced normalcy. We brought leftover burgers. Kelsey, go change out of that costume. You look ridiculous. We will celebrate your degree next week. We will go to Red Lobster. Just the 4 of us. No Aunt Sheila. Okay. She was trying to bribe me with cheddar biscuits. She was trying to patch a bullet hole with a Band-Aid. I looked at the coffee table, amidst the clutter of magazines and junk mail that had accumulated over the week. I saw a corner of a thick cream-colored envelope sticking out from under a catalog. I knew that stationery. It was heavy, expensive paper. My grandparents in Florida still believed in the dignity of handwritten letters. They were old-fashioned, strict, and lived on a fixed income, but they had always sent cards for birthdays. I reached out and pulled the envelope free. My mother's eyes darted to my hand. Her expression shifted from exhaustion to sudden, sharp panic. Kelsey, don't, she started. I looked at the envelope. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Hart. The postmark was from 3 weeks ago. The return address was Boca Raton. I turned it over. The seal had been broken. It had been opened and then shoved back into the pile. Hidden under a furniture catalog. That is private mail. My father barked. Stepping forward, Give it to me. I did not give it to him. I reached inside. My fingers brushed against a stiff piece of paper and a smaller, rectangular slip attached to it. I pulled them out. It was a card. To our wonderful son and daughter-in-law. The shaky cursive read, We are so heartbroken that our health does not allow us to fly up for Kelsey's big day. We know how expensive travel is. And we want to make sure the whole family can be there to cheer for our brilliant granddaughter. Please use this to cover the hotel, the dinner, and the tickets. Give her a big hug from us. We are so proud." Attached to the card with a paperclip was a personal check. I stared at the numbers. They were written in blue ink, the lines slightly wavering but unmistakable. $1,500, my grandparents, who clipped coupons and saved aluminum cans to recycle for extra cash, had sent my parents $1,500. The room seemed to tilt. The air grew thin. I looked up at my parents. My mother was chewing on her lip. Looking at the floor, my father was glaring at me, his jaw set in defiance. "You cashed it," I said. It wasn't a question. I could see the date on the check. It was still valid. But I knew. I knew where the money for the Lake Day supplies had come from. I knew where the new cooler had come from. We needed the money. My father said, his voice hard. "The mortgage is due. The car needed repairs. You think money grows on trees? Your grandparents wanted to help the family. We used it for the family," it says. "For Kelsey's big day," I whispered. It says, "so the family can be there. It all goes into the same pot." He shouted, losing his temper now. "You ungrateful brat. We fed you for 22 years. We clothed you. We put a roof over your head. You think you are entitled to every cent that comes into this house. That money was for us to use as we saw fit, and we saw fit to have a day where we did not have to walk on eggshells around your ego." Brooke laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "God, you are pathetic." Kelsey, standing there holding a check like a detective. "So what? They spent the money. Get over it. You are going to get a big fancy job with your big fancy degree anyway. You do not need Grandma's pension money." I looked at the check again. $1,500. It was not about the money. I had saved more than that from my part-time job at the library. It was about the intention. My grandparents had sacrificed that money to ensure I was not alone, and my parents had taken it, pocketed it, and used it to fund the very excursion that ensured I was alone. They had not just neglected me, they had profited from my milestone. They had stripped the day of its joy and then sold the parts for beer and gasoline. I looked at Evan again. He was watching me now. His eyes were wide. He knew. He had to know. He had seen the new cooler. He had seen the expensive steaks they probably grilled. He had eaten the chocolate ice cream. He had consumed the proceeds of my graduation just as much as they had. "I am not changing," I said quietly. What my mother asked. "I am not changing out of my gown," I said. "And I am not going to Red Lobster next week." My father sneered. "Oh, stop the dramatics. You live under my roof. You follow my rules. Put the check down and go to your room. We are done discussing this." I placed the check gently back onto the table. I did not want to touch it anymore. It felt dirty. I looked at my father, really looked at him. I saw the weakness around his mouth. I saw the fear behind his anger. He was a small man who felt big only when he was making someone else feel small, and I had been his favorite target because I was the only one who threatened to outgrow him. "You are right, Dad," I said. I felt a strange calm settling over me, a cold clarity that was sharper than rage. I am an adult. I walked past him toward the stairs. I did not run. I did not stomp. I walked with the rhythm of someone who had somewhere to be. "Where are you going?" my mother called after me, her voice shrill. "To bed." I lied, but I was not going to bed. As I climbed the stairs, listening to them immediately begin to rationalize their behavior. "She is just tired. She will be fine in the morning. She is so selfish, I knew exactly what I was going to do." I went into my room and locked the door. I took off the gown and folded it neatly. I placed the medal on my desk. Then, I reached under my bed and pulled out the old, battered suitcase I used for dorm move-outs. I opened my closet. I was not just leaving the room, I was leaving the narrative. They wanted to write a story where Kelsey was the villain, the selfish, stuck-up daughter who thought she was better than everyone else. They wanted to write a story where they were the victims of my success. Fine, if they wanted a villain. I would give them a ghost. I began to pack. Not clothes, not shoes. I packed my birth certificate. I packed my social security card. I packed my passport. I packed the hard drive with all my digital files. I packed the one photo of my grandparents I had framed. I moved silently. Downstairs, I could hear the television turn on. I could hear the pop of a soda can. They had moved on. They had survived the confrontation. They thought they had won because I had walked away. They did not understand that I had not walked away from the fight. I had walked away from the battlefield to build a new weapon. I looked at the clock. 11:15. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out my laptop. I opened a new browser window. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed in a search query that I'd been thinking about for years, but never had the courage to execute. How to legally change your name in the state of Oregon. The results populated the screen. I read them, my eyes scanning the requirements, the fees, the forms. It was surprisingly easy. A few pieces of paper, a court appearance, a publication in a newspaper. Then, I opened a second tab. One-way flights to Seattle. I did not have a plan for where I would sleep. I did not have a job lined up, but I had a savings account they did not have access to, and I had a degree they called just a piece of paper. I looked at the door of my bedroom. For 22 years, this room had been a cell where I waited for their approval. Tonight, the door was not a barrier, it was an exit. I closed the laptop, I zipped the suitcase. The gaslighting was over. They had told me I was crazy for thinking they didn't care. They had told me I was selfish for wanting them there. They had told me the money was for the family. They were right about one thing. I was an adult, and adults don't stay where they aren't wanted. They leave, and sometimes, if they are smart, they take the future with them. I waited for the house to go dark. I waited for the heavy breathing of sleep to fill the hallway, and then I prepared to vanish. The next morning, the house smelled of hazelnut coffee and aggressive denial. I woke up at 7 o'clock, not because I had slept well, but because the sun was cutting through my blinds with a brightness that felt mocking. My eyes were gritty, my body felt heavy, like I had run a marathon in my sleep. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, I forgot. Then the image of the empty chairs and the hidden check crashed back into my mind, and the heaviness solidified into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I walked downstairs. I expected silence. I expected tension. Instead, I found a performance of domestic bliss so jarring it made me dizzy. My mother was at the stove, flipping pancakes. She was wearing her floral apron, the one she only wore when company was coming. My father was at the table, reading the Sunday sports section, a mug of coffee steaming by his elbow. Brooke was scrolling on her phone, laughing at a video. It was as if the night before had been a hallucination. "Good morning, sleepyhead," my mother chirped, not turning around. "There is coffee in the pot. I made the blueberry ones you like." I stood in the doorway, my hand gripping the frame. The sheer audacity of her normalcy took my breath away. They were resetting the stage. They were scrubbing the scene of the crime before the yellow tape could even be put up. "I am not hungry," I said. My father lowered the paper. He looked at me over his reading glasses, his expression one of weary patience. "Don't start. Kelsey," he said, "it is a beautiful Sunday. Let us not drag yesterday's mood into today. We are moving on, I repeated. It had been less than 12 hours. "You are making a mountain out of a molehill," my mother said, sliding a stack of pancakes onto a plate. She turned to me, smiling, but her eyes were hard little marbles. "Honestly, Kelsey, it is exhausting walking on eggshells around you. You have this victim complex lately that is really unbecoming." We apologized. We explained the traffic. "Why do you have to be so unforgiving?" She had not apologized. She had made excuses. But in the Hart household, history was written by the loudest person in the room, and that was never me. I poured a cup of black coffee just to have something to do with my hands. I needed caffeine to sharpen the edges of my mind. I took the cup to the back porch, needing fresh air. Needing to escape the suffocating scent of blueberry batter and lies, I stepped outside. The morning air was cool. I leaned against the railing, watching a robin peck at the grass. Over the hedge, I saw our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, tending to her hydrangeas. Mrs. Gable was the neighborhood news broadcast. If you told her a secret at 9 in the morning, the entire subdivision knew it by noon. My mother stepped out onto the porch behind me. I stiffened, expecting another lecture, but she breezed past me, waving enthusiastically at the fence. "Good morning," Linda, my mother, called out. "Beautiful day for the garden, Mrs." Gable looked up and beamed. "Oh. Hi. Elaine. How was the big day yesterday? I bet you are just bursting with pride." I watched my mother's back. I waited for the truth. I waited for her to say, "Oh, we actually missed it," or even the lie she told me. The traffic was terrible. Instead, my mother leaned over the railing, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, intimate tone. "Oh, it was lovely, Linda, just lovely. A bit long. You know how these ceremonies are. We sat through the speeches, but we had to sneak out a little early right after she walked. My husband's back was acting up in those bleachers, but seeing her up there, just magical." I froze. The coffee cup shook in my hand. She was lying. She was not just lying to me. She was manufacturing a public reality. She was planting the seed in the community that they were supportive parents, ensuring that if I ever complained, I would look like a liar. "We were there," she was saying. "We saw her." "Mrs. Gable nodded sympathetically. "Oh, those bleachers are murder on the back. But I am glad you made it. She is such a smart girl." "She is," my mother agreed, and then she delivered the final twist of the knife. "We are just worried she is working too hard. You know how intense she gets. We keep telling her to slow down, to just enjoy life, but she puts so much pressure on herself. It is hard to watch." I backed away. I retreated into the house before I could scream. They were painting me as the neurotic, high-strung daughter who could not be satisfied, while casting themselves as the patient, concerned parents. It was a masterclass in narrative control. I walked through the kitchen. Ignoring my father's question about where I was going, I went upstairs. But I did not go to my room. I went to the attic. I told myself I was looking for the old duffel bag I used for camping. Something sturdy to pack my books in, but deep down, I knew I was looking for evidence. My brain was humming with a new frequency, a cold, analytical hum. If they could lie so easily about yesterday, what else had they lied about if the check from my grandparents had been hidden? What else was buried? The attic was stiflingly hot. It smelled of fiberglass insulation and dry rot. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light coming from the vent. I navigated through the maze of holiday decorations. There was the artificial Christmas tree, wrapped in plastic like a body. There were boxes of Halloween costumes. There were crates of my father's old tools. In the far corner, wedged behind a stack of old coolers, including the old one they had replaced with my graduation money, was a cardboard box. It was not sealed. It had my name scrawled on the side in black marker, Kelsey School Stuff. I had never seen this box before. I knelt on the rough plywood floor. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I pulled the flaps open. The first thing I saw was a certificate. It was from the 3rd grade. Spelling bee champion. The gold foil seal was peeling slightly. I remembered that day. I remembered winning. I remembered coming home and showing it to my mother. And I remembered her saying, "That's nice. Honey, put it on the counter." I had never seen it again. I assumed it had been thrown away. It was here. I dug deeper. There were honor roll certificates from middle school. There was a medal for a science fair project I had won in 8th grade, a project I had built entirely on my own because my father said he was too busy to help. There were photos, professional school portraits where I was smiling, wearing blazers, looking confident. These photos had never hung on our walls. The walls downstairs were covered with pictures of family vacations, of Brooke at her dance recitals, of Evan at his baseball games. My achievements had been archived. They had been categorized, boxed, and hidden behind the Christmas tree as if they were shameful secrets. But why? Why keep them if you are going to hide them, then, at the very bottom of the box, beneath a stack of report cards that were all straight A's, I found a heavy cream-colored envelope. It had already been opened. I recognized the logo in the corner immediately. It was from the National Youth Leadership Council. I pulled the letter out. The date on the header was from 3 years ago. I would have been 19, a sophomore in college. Dear Ms. Hart, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected to attend the Summer Advanced Logic and Rhetoric Summit in Washington. This is a fully funded fellowship. I stopped reading. The air in the attic seemed to vanish. 3 years ago, I remembered that summer. I had spent it working 2 dead-end jobs at a diner and a car wash, because my parents told me they could not afford to help me with my tuition for the fall semester. I had spent 3 months scrubbing grease and wiping windshields, exhausted and miserable, thinking I had no other options, and all the while, this letter had been sitting in a box in the attic. It was a fully funded fellowship. It would have paid for everything. It would have put me in a room with future senators and CEOs. It would have been a golden ticket on my resume. They had hidden it. They did not just ignore my success. They actively sabotaged it. They saw a ladder that would take me out of their reach, and they kicked it over before I even knew it was there. I sat there for a long time, holding the letter. My hands were trembling, not with sadness, but with a rage so pure it felt like clarity. I stood up, I took the box, I walked downstairs, the box heavy in my arms. I walked into the living room where they were all watching television. The sound of a laugh track filled the room. I dropped the box onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy, dusty thud, scattering the remote controls. My mother jumped. My father looked up, annoyed. "What in the world are you doing?" my mother asked. "You are getting dust everywhere." I reached into the box and pulled out the letter. I held it up. "Why did I never see this?" I asked. My voice was very quiet, but it cut through the sitcom noise. My mother squinted at the paper. Then, recognition flickered in her eyes. She did not look guilty. She looked defensive. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "That was years ago. Kelsey, why are you digging through old trash? It was a full scholarship." I said, "It was a fellowship in D.C. I spent that summer scrubbing dishes because you said we had no money. Why did you hide it?" My father muted the TV. He leaned forward, his face turning red. "We did not hide it," he said. "We made a parenting decision." "A parenting decision," I asked. "To steal my future." "To keep you grounded," my mother snapped. She stood up, her face flushing. "Do you have any idea how unbearable you would have been if you went to that thing? You were already acting like you were better than us. You were already correcting our grammar and talking about things we did not understand. If you had gone to Washington and rubbed elbows with those snobs, you never would have come back." I stared at her. The truth was finally out, naked and ugly in the Sunday morning light. "You were afraid I wouldn't come back." I said, "We wanted you to stay part of this family," my mother said, her voice rising. "We wanted you to be normal. Kelsey, is that a crime? We wanted a daughter who could sit at the dinner table and talk about normal things, not one who made everyone else feel stupid just by being in the room." I looked at Brooke. She was smirking. She was enjoying this. "It must be so hard," Brooke drawled, picking at her fingernails. "Being so smart that your parents have to hide your mail just to keep your head from exploding. God, you are exhausting. Even your success is a burden to us. Do you know how annoying it is to hear you talk about your grades? We get it. You are the genius. We are the idiots." I turned to Evan. He was not looking at his phone this time. He was looking at the box. "I told them." Evan stammered. I looked at him. "You told them what I told Mom, that box was too heavy to be on the top shelf." Evan said quietly, "Last Christmas, when we were getting the decorations down. I saw the letter then. I asked Mom if you knew about it. And I asked, my voice tight. She said it was for your own good." Evan whispered. "She said you would leave us if you got the chance. So I put it back behind the tree. I looked at my brother, my baby brother, the one I had tutored, the one I had protected from bullies. You knew. I said, For 3 years. You watched me work double shifts. You watched me cry over tuition bills. And you knew I had a full ride waiting in a box in the attic. I didn't want you to leave either, Evan said, his voice cracking. If you went to DC, who was going to help me with my calculus? Who was going to fix my computer? The selfishness was breathtaking. It was a gravitational pull. They were a black hole, and I was the star they were trying to swallow. They did not love me. They consumed me. They used my competence to fix their problems. But they sabotaged my opportunities to ensure I would never be too successful to serve them. My mother stepped forward, trying to regain control of the narrative. We did it out of love, Kelsey, she said, her voice trembling with that fake emotion again. We wanted to keep you safe. Those people in DC, that world, it is not for people like us. You belong here, with your family. I looked at the box of hidden awards. I looked at the stolen check from yesterday. I looked at the letter that represented a stolen summer. This wasn't an accident. I said, the graduation wasn't a mistake. The check wasn't a desperate need. This is a system. You have been clipping my wings for years, and then complaining that I don't fly the way you want me to. I picked up the letter, I folded it, and put it in my pocket. You are right about one thing. Mom. I said, what is that? She asked, looking hopeful, thinking I was about to agree with her twisted logic. I don't belong here, I said. I turned and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard my father scoff. She is just being dramatic again, he said to the others. Let her pout. She will come down for lunch when she gets hungry. She has nowhere else to go. He was wrong. I had nowhere else to go yesterday. But today, I had a plan, and unlike them, I did not need a box in the attic to hide my intentions. I was going to hide them in plain sight, right up until the moment I vanished. I went back to my room and pulled the suitcase out from under the bed again. I added the letter to the stack of documents. It was not an opportunity anymore. It was evidence. I sat down at my laptop. I had confirmed the name change requirements. Now, I needed to execute the logistics. I logged into my bank account. I transferred every cent from the savings account my parents could see into the new external account I had opened the night before. It was $4,300. Then, I initiated a second transfer, when I was 18. My grandmother had opened a small bond in my name. It had matured last week. My parents didn't know about it because the paperwork went to my grandmother's address. It was worth $2,000. I moved it all. I was not just leaving. I was defunding their tech support, their emotional punching bag, and their source of narcissistic supply. I heard a knock on my door. Go away, I said. It was Evan. Kelsey, he whispered through the wood. Mom is making sandwiches. She says you have to come down. She says we are going to watch a movie together. Tell her I am sick. I said, tell her I have a migraine. There was a pause. Are you really mad? Evan asked. I closed my eyes. The tragedy was that he didn't even understand what he had done. He thought this was a fight about a letter. He didn't understand that he had been an accomplice to the theft of my life. I am not mad. Evan, I said through the door, I am done. I heard his footsteps retreat. I looked at the empty walls of my room. They thought they had won. They thought that by hiding my awards, they could hide my potential. They thought that by missing my graduation, they could diminish my achievement. But all they had done was show me exactly who they were, and in doing so, they had given me the permission I didn't know I needed. I did not need to be Kelsey Hart, the good daughter who tried to please people who could not be pleased. Kelsey Hart was a character they had written. I was about to write her out of the show. The Monday after the attic discovery, I did not stay in bed. I did not sulk. I woke up at 6 a.m, showered, dressed in my most nondescript slacks and a blouse, and told my mother I was going to the public library to update my resume. That was the first lie of my new life. I did go to the library, but I did not open my resume. I sat in the farthest corner of the reference section, shielded by a stack of encyclopedias, and opened a private browsing window. I was done crying over the past. It was time to engineer the future. My first search was clinical: how to change legal name and residency in a new state. I read through the statutes for Washington state. I had chosen Washington not because I knew anyone there, but because it was the farthest I could possibly get from Florida without driving into the ocean. It was a place of rain and gray skies, the opposite of the humid, suffocating sunshine of my childhood. It looked like a place where a person could disappear. The process was bureaucratic, but manageable. I would need to file a petition with the district court. I would need to pay a filing fee of roughly $200. I would need to publish a notice in a legal newspaper. But the most important part was that I could do it after I established residency. I did not have to do it here, under their noses. I could move as Kelsey Hart and emerge from the chrysalis as someone else entirely. I printed the forms, not to fill them out yet, but to memorize them. I needed to know every line, every requirement, so that when I landed, I would not waste a single second. Then, I shifted to the second, more volatile part of my plan. I remembered a conversation from 4 years ago. It was Thanksgiving, my grandfather. Before his memory started to fade and his hands started to shake, had pulled me aside while my father was yelling at the football game on television. He had winked at me, a conspiratorial glint in his eye, and whispered that he had set up a launch pad for me. When you finish school, Kels, he had said, there is a little something to help you fly the coop. Don't let your dad eat it up. I had assumed he meant a few $100s in a savings bond, but after finding the stolen check and the hidden fellowship letter, I realized my parents had a pattern of intercepting resources. If there was a launch pad, they would have tried to dismantle it. I pulled out my phone. I did not use the family contact list. I searched for the law firm my grandparents had used for 40 years, Henderson and Associates. I dialed the number. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Henderson and Associates. How may I direct your call? I need to speak to Mr. Henderson. I said. My voice was steady, practiced. This is Kelsey Hart. I am calling regarding the trust established by Robert and Martha Hart. I was put on hold for 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes felt like 2 years. I imagined my mother walking into the library. I imagined my father getting a notification on his phone that I was talking to a lawyer. I knew that was technologically impossible, but paranoia was my new baseline. Kelsey, Mr. Henderson's voice was gravelly and warm. My goodness, I have not seen you since you were in braces. Congratulations on your graduation. Your grandfather would have been over the moon. Thank you. Mr. Henderson, I said, skipping the pleasantries. I am calling because I'm preparing to move for a job opportunity, and I recalled Granddad mentioning a fund. I wanted to check the status of it before I made any financial commitments. There was a pause, the sound of typing on a keyboard. Yes, here it is, he said. The Hart Grandchild Education and Advancement Trust. It was set to vest upon the confirmation of your bachelor's degree. We received the transcript verification from your university registrar on Friday morning. My breath hitched. My parents had not sent that verification. The university had sent it automatically. My parents probably did not even know the trigger had been pulled. The current balance is $22,450. Mr. Henderson said, it is designated for tuition, housing, or relocation costs. $22,000. The number rang in my ears. It was not a fortune. It was not enough to buy a house or retire. But to a girl with $4,000 in savings and a family determined to keep her poor, it was freedom. It was a year of rent. It was a used car. It was a barrier between me and desperation. Mr. Henderson, I said, keeping my voice low, does my father have access to this account? He is the secondary trustee, Mr. Henderson said. However, the terms state that upon your 22nd birthday and graduation, the primary beneficiary, that is, you gain sole signatory power. Your father can view the statement, but he cannot withdraw without your countersignature. I closed my eyes. He can view the statement. That was the danger. Mr. Henderson, I need to make a request. I said, I am transitioning to a new bank for my relocation. I would like to close the trust account and have the full balance wired to my personal account today. Today, he sounded surprised. Usually, we mail a cashier's check. I am leaving town on Thursday. I lied. I need the funds liquid to secure my apartment. If you mail it to my parents' address, I will not receive it in time. There was a silence. I could hear him weighing the request. He was a lawyer. He knew family dynamics. He likely knew my father. Send me your wire instructions. Mr. Henderson said finally. I will have the paralegal process it as an urgent disbursement. You should see it by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, I whispered. And Mr. Henderson, please do not send a confirmation letter to the house. Please email it to me directly. My parents are overwhelmed right now. Understood, he said. Good luck. Kelsey. I hung up and immediately felt like I might vomit. I had just stolen my own inheritance out from under my father's nose. When he saw that zero balance on the next quarterly statement, he was going to go nuclear. But by then, I would be a ghost. I spent the next 3 hours severing the digital umbilical cords. I went to a local credit union, not the national bank my parents used, and opened a checking account. I set up the wire transfer destination there. I went to a tech store and bought a cheap, prepaid burner phone. I did not turn it on yet. I kept it in its plastic packaging, buried deep in my bag. I created a new email address, eperez, professional@protonmail.com. It was the first time I had typed my chosen name, Ella Perez. It looked strange on the screen, foreign and sharp. Perez was my grandmother's maiden name, a nod to the only lineage that had ever shown me kindness without strings attached. Ella was just a sound I liked. It sounded light. It sounded like a girl who didn't carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. I began the job hunt. I did not look at local listings. I filtered my search on LinkedIn to Seattle, Washington, and remote. I applied to everything that fit my degree in data analytics. I found a listing for a company called Northlight Metrics, junior marketing analyst. The description asked for someone with obsessive attention to detail and a thick skin. I almost laughed. I had been training for that role my entire life. I uploaded my resume, the one with the valedictorian status in bold, the one my mother hated. By 4 o'clock, I was exhausted. But the hardest part was yet to come. I had to go home. I had to go back into that house and pretend that I was still their Kelsey. I pulled into the driveway. My father's truck was there. My stomach tightened, but I forced my facial muscles to relax. I practiced my expression in the rearview mirror, bored, defeated, submissive. I walked inside. My father was watching the news. Any luck, he asked, not looking away from the screen. Not really, I said, slumping my shoulders. The job market is tough. Everyone wants 3 years of experience. He snorted. Welcome to the real world. Kid, that fancy degree doesn't open doors like you thought it would. Does it? No, sir, I said. You were right. He turned to look at me then. His eyes narrowed, scanning my face for sarcasm, but I gave him nothing. I gave him the flat, dull look of a child who has finally been broken. He smiled. It was a satisfied, oily smile. Well, don't worry, he said. I spoke to Uncle Jerry. He says he might have a spot for you at the dealership. Answering phones, filing paperwork. It pays minimum wage, but it is a start. You need to learn some humility before you try to run the world. Thank you. Dad, I said, that sounds practical. I walked into the kitchen. My mother was chopping vegetables. She looked at me warily. Are you still in a mood? She asked. No, Mom, I said. I am sorry about yesterday. I was just tired. I know you guys did your best. Her shoulders dropped 3 inches. The tension evaporated from the room. She beamed, vindicated. I told your father you would come around, she said, pointing the knife at me playfully. You just get so worked up. Kelsey, we forgive you. Just don't let it happen again. I forced a smile. It felt like stretching rubber over a skull. I promise. For the next 2 days. I was the perfect daughter. I cooked dinner on Tuesday. I listened to Brooke complain about her boyfriend for 45 minutes without offering a single solution, just nodding and saying, That sucks. Brooke, I watched TV with Evan, laughing when he laughed, even though I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him for his cowardice. I was not living. I was acting. And I was delivering an Oscar-worthy performance. But while they slept, I was working. My room became a staging ground. I could not pack obvious boxes. That would tip them off. I had to pack selectively. I took the black duffel bag from my closet. I lined the bottom with my documents, the birth certificate, the passport, the social security card. I took the hard drive with my digital life. Then came the sentimental purge. This was the most painful part. I looked around my room at the books, the stuffed animals from childhood, the trinkets I had collected. I could not take them, if I took too much. They would notice things were missing. I had to choose what to save and what to abandon. I took the framed photo of my grandparents. I took a small jewelry box that contained a necklace my grandmother had given me. I took my favorite worn-out hoodie. I left the rest. I left the trophies they had finally let me display. I left the clothes my mother had bought me because she wanted me to look ladylike. I left the room exactly as it was, a museum to a girl who was about to cease to exist. On Wednesday afternoon, I checked my new bank account from the library computer. Incoming wire, Henderson Trust, $22,450. It was there. Real, tangible leverage. I sat in the library chair and stared at the screen until my vision blurred. I was rich. Not by the world's standards, but by the standards of a fugitive. I had enough gas money to drive to the moon. I booked a flight for Thursday morning, 6:30 in the morning. I would leave the house at 4, claiming I was going for an early run, something I did occasionally, by the time they woke up. I would be over Nebraska. I did not book a return ticket. Wednesday night was surreal. We ate spaghetti. My father made a joke about how much cheese Evan was putting on his pasta. My mother talked about the church bake sale coming up on the weekend. "Kelsey, you should bake your brownies," my mother said. "Everyone loves them." I nodded, swallowing a mouthful of pasta that tasted like cardboard. "Sure, Mom, I can do that on Friday." I knew that on Friday. I would be sitting in an empty studio apartment in Seattle, eating ramen noodles and sleeping on the floor, but I nodded. "Sure, Friday, after dinner." We all sat in the living room. They turned on America's Funniest Home Videos. It was a rerun. I sat in the corner of the sofa, my legs tucked under me. I watched them. I really watched them. I looked at my father, whose ego was so fragile he had to crush his own child to feel tall. I looked at my mother, who confused control with love and manipulation with parenting. I looked at Brooke, who had learned to survive by becoming a mirror of their cruelty. I looked at Evan, who was learning that silence was the safest currency. They were laughing at a video of a dog falling into a pool. Their laughter was genuine. They were happy. They were happy because I was back in my box. They were happy because the threat of my success had been neutralized. They thought they had successfully gaslit me into believing that my graduation didn't matter, that my anger was a mental illness, and that my place was here, answering phones at a car dealership. They had erased my graduation. They had erased my summer fellowship. They had tried to erase my financial independence. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I am not Kelsey Hart. I thought, the name felt like an itchy sweater I was dying to take off. Kelsey Hart is the girl who stays. Kelsey. Hart is the girl who apologizes for being excellent. Kelsey Hart is the girl who lets you steal her light. I stood up. "I'm going to turn in early." I said, "I have a headache." My father didn't even look away from the TV. "Take some aspirin. Don't be grumpy tomorrow. Good night," I said. It was the last time I would ever speak to them. I walked up the stairs. Every step felt heavy. Final. I walked down the hallway, past the family photos that were lies frozen in time. I went into my room and closed the door. I did not lock it. That would be suspicious. I changed into my travel clothes, jeans, sneakers, that comfortable hoodie. I checked my bag one last time. Laptop, charger, documents, money, the letter from the attic. I lay down on top of the covers, fully dressed, my shoes still on. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazily in the dark. I did not sleep. I listened to the house settle. I heard the TV turn off. I heard the toilets flush. I heard the doors close. I heard my father's snoring start to rumble through the wall. At 3:30 in the morning, the house was a tomb. I sat up. I picked up my bag. It was light, surprisingly so. A whole life, condensed into 20 pounds of nylon and zipper. I took the sticky notepad from my desk. I had debated leaving a letter, a manifesto, a list of grievances. I wanted to scream at them on paper. I wanted to detail every hurt, every slight, every stolen moment. But then I realized that was what Kelsey would do. Kelsey would try to explain. Kelsey would want them to understand. Ella Perez did not care if they understood. Ella Perez knew that explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you is a waste of ink. I wrote 5 words. I am not coming back. I stuck the note to the mirror. I walked to the door. I did not look back. I stepped out into the hallway, avoiding the squeaky board on the 3rd step, a habit ingrained in me since childhood. I glided through the kitchen, illuminated only by the green clock on the microwave. I opened the back door. The night air was cool and smelled of dew. I walked to my car. I did not start the engine in the driveway. I put the car in neutral and pushed it. It rolled silently down the slight incline of the driveway and into the street. I pushed it another 50 feet, past Mrs. Gable's hydrangeas, past the sleeping neighborhood that thought I was the crazy daughter. When I was around the corner, I climbed in. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. To me, it sounded like a cannon shot. I put the car in drive. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I drove toward the highway, toward the airport, toward the dawn. The name Kelsey Hart stayed in that house, trapped in the attic with the dust and the lies. I was alone. I was terrified, but as I merged onto the interstate, watching the speedometer climb to 70, I realized something else. I was free. The gavel hit the wooden block with a sound that was sharper and more final than a gunshot. I stood before the judge in a damp, gray courthouse in King County, Washington. The room smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I was wearing a blazer I had bought at a thrift store 3 days prior, and my hands were clasped behind my back to hide the fact that they were shaking. The judge was a woman with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked at the paperwork in front of her, then down at me. "Petitioner," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room, "you are requesting to legally change your name from Kelsey Hart to Ella Perez. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice did not crack. "Do you have any illegal intent? Are you attempting to evade debt, criminal charges, or lawsuits?" "No, Your Honor." She studied me for a second longer than was necessary. I wondered what she saw. Did she see a fugitive? Did she see a girl running away from a crime scene? Or did she see someone who was simply trying to survive her own history? She picked up her pen. "Granted," she said. She signed the order. The clerk stamped it. Thump thump. The sound vibrated through the floorboards and up into the soles of my shoes. It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut. Kelsey Hart, the valedictorian. The disappointment. The girl who waited in the parking lot was legally dead. I walked out of the courthouse into the drizzling Seattle rain. For the first time in my life, the rain did not feel gloomy. It felt like a baptism. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of pine needles and wet pavement. I was Ella Perez, and Ella Perez did not have parents who forgot her. Ella Perez had no past. She only had a future. I drove my beat-up sedan to my new home. It was a studio apartment in a building that clung to the side of a hill in West Seattle. The rent was obscene. It was $2,100 a month, which was more than half of what I expected to make, but I paid it without flinching. I paid it because the building had a security guard. I paid it because the door had a deadbolt that looked like it could stop a battering ram. I walked into the apartment. It was small. If I stretched my arms out, I could almost touch both walls. The furniture was sparse, a mattress on the floor, a folding table I used as a desk, and a single chair. But there was a window. It was floor-to-ceiling glass, and it looked out over the Puget Sound. I could see the ferries cutting white lines across the dark water. I could see the Olympic mountains shrouded in mist. I stood at that window for a long time. In my old house, my room faced the driveway. I had spent years watching my parents come and go, monitoring their moods by the speed at which they parked their cars. Here, the only thing I had to watch was the tide coming in. I was lonely. God, I was lonely. The silence in the apartment was loud, but it was a clean silence. It was not the loaded silence of the Hart household, where quiet meant someone was angry. This was just peace. It was expensive, terrifying peace. 2 days later, I put on my best suit and drove to the headquarters of Northlight Metrics. It was a glass monolith in downtown Seattle. I checked in at the front desk, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs. They are going to know. A voice in my head whispered, they are going to look at you and see the fraud. They are going to see the girl whose own mother thinks she is arrogant. I sat in the waiting area, clutching my portfolio. A man walked out. He was tall, wearing a crisp shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked like the kind of person who drank espresso and ran marathons. Ella, he asked. I stood up. Yes, I am Ella. I am David, the director of analytics. Come on back. We walked into his office. It was messy in a way that suggested high-intelligence whiteboards covered in equations. Stacks of data reports on the floor. He sat down and opened my resume. I braced myself. I prepared for the questions I had been trained to fear. Why do you think you are special? Do you think this degree makes you better than us? David scanned the paper. He stopped at the education section. He looked up. His eyebrows raised. Valedictorian, he said, summa cum laude. And you managed the university data migration project as a student intern. I swallowed hard. Yes, I said, my voice tight. I hope that is not a problem. I know it can seem excessive. I am happy to start at the bottom. I do not expect special treatment. David laughed. It was a genuine, confused laugh. Problem, he asked. Ella, this is incredible. We have been looking for someone who understands this specific database architecture for 6 months. Most candidates glaze over when we mention it. You built a migration tool for it. Yes, I said, bewildered. He leaned forward, his eyes shining with professional excitement. That is not excessive. That is exactly what we need. We deal with massive data sets here. We need people who are obsessive about accuracy. We need people who strive for perfection. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a knot loosening. He was not threatened. He was relieved. We spent the next hour talking about data modeling. I forgot to be scared. I forgot to shrink. I spoke about my work with the passion that usually earned me eye rolls at the dinner table. David nodded, took notes, and asked follow-up questions that actually challenged me. At the end of the interview, he stood up and shook my hand. I have 2 more candidates to see, he said. But honestly, you are the front runner. I have never seen a junior applicant with this level of preparation. I walked out of the building feeling lightheaded. I got the call 3 hours later. We want to offer you the position, the HR representative said. Starting salary is $85,000 a year, plus a signing bonus and full benefits. $85,000. I sat on my mattress on the floor and stared at the phone. It was more money than my father made. It was enough to be safe. It was enough to never ask anyone for anything ever again. I accepted the job. I hung up the phone. And then, for the first time since the graduation, I cried. I cried because I was happy. And I cried because I had spent 22 years believing that my competence was a character flaw, only to find out that in the real world, it was a currency. Transitioning to life in Seattle was a culture shock. I was used to walking on eggshells. I was used to scanning rooms for emotional landmines. I was used to apologizing for existing. One evening, I was struggling to carry 3 bags of groceries up the stairs to my apartment because the elevator was out of order. A door opened on the 3rd floor. A woman stepped out. She looked to be about 30, with wild curly hair and a t-shirt that said Red Band Books. "Oh my gosh, let me help you," she exclaimed, rushing forward. I flinched. I physically recoiled. pulling the bags closer to my chest. No, I am fine. I have it. I am sorry. I did not mean to make noise. The woman stopped. She looked at me, tilting her head. You did not make any noise, she said gently. And you do not have to be sorry for carrying groceries. That looks heavy. I am Marisol. I live in 3B. She reached out and took the heaviest bag from my hand before I could protest. She carried it all the way to my door. I unlocked the apartment, feeling awkward and defensive. I waited for the transaction. I waited for her to ask for a favor, or to pry into my life, or to make a comment about how little furniture I had. Here you go, she said, setting the bag down. Welcome to the building. If you need to borrow sugar or a cup of wine or just vent about the elevator, knock on my door. She turned to leave. Wait, I said. She turned back. Why, I asked. Why what? Why did you help me? She laughed, a warm, easy sound that bounced off the hallway walls. Because you have 2 hands and 3 bags. It is just math. Neighbor. She waved and walked away. I stood there, stunned. It was just math. It was kindness without an invoice. Marisol Vega became my first friend. She was a 2nd-grade teacher with a heart the size of the state and a complete lack of pretense. She invited me over for Taco Tuesdays. She dragged me to farmers markets. She was the first person to point out my shrinking. We were at a coffee shop one rainy Saturday. I had ordered a latte, and the barista had given me an iced tea by mistake. Oh, it is fine, I said quickly, reaching for the cup. I will just drink this. I do not want to be a bother. Marisol reached out and put her hand over mine, stopping me. Ella, she said seriously, you ordered a latte. You paid $6 for a latte. You are allowed to have the latte. I don't want them to think I am difficult. I mumbled. You are not being difficult, she said. You are getting what you paid for. Why do you always do that? Do what you shrink, she said. You make yourself tiny. You apologize for taking up space. You apologize for breathing. Who taught you that? The question hung in the air between us. Who taught you that the answer was a list of names I had sworn never to speak again? I looked at Marisol. Her eyes were not judgmental. They were sad. She saw the damage. She didn't know the story, but she saw the scars. I think I need to talk to someone, I whispered. The following week, I sat in the office of Dr. Aris, a therapist Marisol had recommended. The office was quiet and smelled of lavender. I spent the first 2 sessions just reciting the facts. I told him about the graduation. I told him about the check. I told him about the box in the attic. I told him about the name change. I told it all with a dry, clinical detachment, as if I were narrating a documentary about someone else. Doctor? Aris listened. He took notes. When I finished, he looked at me. You are incredibly resilient. Ella, he said, you engineered a brilliant escape, but you are still operating in survival mode. You are still waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was right. I checked my bank account 3 times a day. I had a recurring nightmare where I walked into my office at Northlight Metrics and my father was sitting at my desk, laughing, tearing up my degree. We started the work of deprogramming. It was brutal. It was harder than the data analytics I did at work. I had to learn that my success was not an attack on others. I had to learn that no was a complete sentence. I had to learn that I did not owe my parents a return on their investment because I was a human being, not a stock portfolio. One afternoon, Doctor, Aris asked me a question that stopped me cold. You have cut them off completely, he said. You have changed your name. You have moved across the country. Do you think they are looking for you? I looked out the window at the gray Seattle sky. I don't know. I said, what is your greatest fear regarding them? He asked. I thought about it. Was I afraid they would drag me back? No. I was legally an adult. Was I afraid they would hurt me physically? No. They were cowards. I am afraid that they are not looking for me. I said, I am afraid that they are only looking for the asset. I am afraid that if my phone rings, it won't be because they miss their daughter. It will be because the car broke down, or the mortgage is due, and they lost their ATM. And if that happens, Doctor, Aris asked, then I will know for sure. I said, if they never call, it means I didn't matter. If they do call, it means I only mattered as a resource. It is a losing game either way. But as the months passed, the silence from the East Coast remained unbroken. I began to thrive. I was promoted to senior analyst after only 6 months. I bought a used Honda that smelled like vanilla air freshener and didn't break down. I started dressing in colors other than gray. I was building a life. I was becoming Ella Perez in more than just name. But the question remained, a splinter in the back of my mind. They knew I was gone. They had found the note. They had seen the empty room. Did they cry? Did my mother sit on my bed and weep for the daughter she drove away? Did my father stare at the wall and wonder where he went wrong? Or did they just shrug? Turn on the TV and complain that I was being dramatic again? I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was free, but sometimes, late at night, when the rain lashed against the glass of my apartment, I would stare at my burner phone, the one I kept in a drawer, just in case, and wonder. They had scheduled my erasure at the graduation. Now, I had erased myself. The only difference was that I had done it to save my life. They had done it to save their ego. And deep down, I knew the silence wouldn't last forever. People like them don't let things go. They don't let property walk away. They just wait until they are desperate enough to come looking for it. I was ready. I had my documents. I had my money. I had my truth. Let them come. I was not the girl in the parking lot anymore. I was the girl who owned the building. The promotion did not happen in the shadows. It did not happen with a hushed conversation in the kitchen or a certificate stuffed into a cardboard box. It happened in the main conference room of Northlight Metrics, under the hum of halogen lights, in front of 25 people. David stood at the head of the table. The screen behind him displayed the fourth quarter projections for the Meridian account, a massive retail client that had been bleeding money on inefficient ad spend for 2 years. I had spent the last 6 weeks living inside that data. I had dreamt in spreadsheets. I had found a correlation between weather patterns and regional buying habits that the previous analysts had missed entirely. I had built a model that predicted with 98% accuracy where the client needed to pull back and where they needed to double down. "This is the Perez model," David said, gesturing to the screen. He did not claim it. He did not say we. He named it after me. I sat there, my hands folded on the table, waiting for the caveat. I waited for him to say, "But of course, she is new." Or, "She had a lot of help." He looked at the CEO. "Ella saved this account," David said simply. "Her analysis just saved the client $4 million this quarter alone, effective immediately. She is moving up to lead strategist." The room erupted in applause. It was not polite applause. It was genuine. People were nodding. The CEO, a terrifying woman named Ms. Chung, who rarely smiled, looked at me and gave a sharp, approving nod. I felt a flush rise on my cheeks. But for the first time in my life, it was not the heat of shame. It was the heat of adrenaline. I did not shrink. I did not look at the floor. I looked Ms. Chung in the eye and smiled. "Thank you," I said. My voice did not shake. "I have some ideas for Q1 as well." Ms. Cheng laughed. "I like the hunger. Perez, let's hear them." I walked out of that meeting with a new title and a raise that brought my salary to $110,000 a year. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and realized that my hands were steady. My competence was not a threat here. It was the engine. That night, Marisol dragged me to a rooftop bar in Capitol Hill to celebrate. The city of Seattle sprawled out beneath us, a grid of rain-slicked lights. Marisol ordered a bottle of champagne that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to be. To the lead strategist, she shouted, raising her glass. I clinked my glass against hers. "I feel like an imposter," I admitted, the old reflex dying hard. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me I'm taking up too much space." Marisol set her glass down. Her expression turned serious. "Stop it," she said. "Stop what?" "Stop apologizing for being good at your job," she said. "You are so used to people trying to cut you down to size that you are doing it to yourself before they get the chance. It is a defense mechanism. Ella, but you do not need to defend yourself against success. You earned it. I looked at the bubbles rising in my glass. My family would hate this. I whispered, they would say I am showing off. Screw them, Marisol said cheerfully. If people are intimidated by your light, that is their problem to buy sunglasses. It is not your job to dim the switch. She leaned in, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Now that you are a big-shot executive, we need to talk about your love life. I groaned. Marisol, please, I am married to my spreadsheets. Marisol ignored me. She pointed toward the bar. See that guy? The one in the gray sweater, he's been looking at you for 20 minutes. And not in a creepy way, in a, who is that force of nature kind of way. I looked. He was standing near the rail, holding a craft beer. He was tall, with messy dark hair and a face that looked kind. He wasn't aggressively handsome in the way Brooke's boyfriends always were preened and polished. He looked comfortable. He looked like he read books and knew how to fix things. Go say hi. Marisol commanded. I can't. I said, you negotiated a multi-million-dollar contract today. She said, you can say hello to a man in a sweater. I took a deep breath. I walked over. Hi, I said, I am Ella. He turned. His eyes were a warm hazel. He smiled, and it reached the corners of his eyes. I know, he said. I heard your friend toast you. Congratulations on the promotion. I am Noah. Noah Bennett was an architect. We talked for 3 hours that night. We talked about structural integrity. We talked about the way light hits a building at different times of day. We talked about the efficiency of urban planning. It was the most romantic conversation I had ever finished. He asked me what I did. I told him about the data model. I braced myself for the glazed look, or the insecure joke about me being too smart. Noah just listened. He leaned in. So you found a pattern in the chaos, he asked. That is incredible. It is like you are building a map for the future. He didn't try to explain my job to me. He didn't try to one-up me with a story about a building he designed. He just admired the architecture of my mind. We started dating slowly. I was like a feral cat, skittish and prone to running away at the first sign of sudden movement. Noah seemed to understand this without me ever saying a word. He took me to see a site he was working on, a renovation of an old library. We walked through the dust and the exposed beams. My father used to hate libraries. I said suddenly, the words slipping out before I could check them. He said they were for people who didn't have real work to do. Noah stopped. He looked at me, holding a roll of blueprints. He didn't ask for the whole tragic backstory. He didn't try to fix it. That sounds lonely for him, Noah said quietly. To live in a world without stories. He didn't defend my father, and he didn't attack him. He just acknowledged the sadness of it and let it be. He respected my boundaries in a way that felt foreign. If I said I needed to work late, he didn't guilt-trip me. He brought me Thai food and left it on my desk. If I said I didn't want to talk about my childhood, he talked about the Seahawks instead. One night, 3 months into our relationship, we were at his apartment making dinner. I was chopping peppers, and I did it with the precise, military efficiency my mother had demanded. Noah watched me. You don't have to be perfect here, Ella, he said softly. I froze, the knife hovering over a red pepper. I am not trying to be perfect. I lied. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me from behind. He rested his chin on my shoulder. You are holding your breath, he said. You hold your breath every time you think you might make a mistake. You can drop a pepper. You can burn the rice. I am not going to stop liking you because you are human. I leaned back into him. I let the air out of my lungs. My family, I started, then stopped. I know, he said into my hair. I can tell. Whoever they were, they made you feel like you had to earn your place in the room every single day. Yes, I whispered. Well, you don't have to earn it here, he said. You are just here. It was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever said to me. It meant I had to be loved for who I was, not for what I could produce. The next week, the Northlight Metrics internal newsletter came out. Usually, I deleted these emails without reading them, but the subject line caught my eye: Rising Stars. The future of analytics. I clicked it. There was my picture. It was a candid shot David had taken during a presentation. I was pointing at a screen, my mouth open mid-sentence, looking fierce and in command. I didn't look like the girl who hid in the bathroom. I looked like a woman who owned the building. The caption read, Ella Perez, the architect of clarity. I stared at the name, Ella Perez. It wasn't a disguise anymore. It was me. I printed the page. I didn't hide it in a box in the attic. I pinned it to the corkboard in my cubicle. Then, I forwarded the email to Noah. His reply came 2 minutes later. I am framing this. Also, Architect of Clarity. That is a better title than mine. I am jealous. Dinner is on me tonight. He was proud. He wasn't threatened. He wasn't worried that I would outshine him. He was just happy that I was shining. I felt a shift in my chest, a physical realignment of my organs. The heavy stone of shame I had carried for 22 years was dissolving. I started to upgrade my life. I stopped living like a fugitive. I logged into my student loan portal. I had been making the minimum payments, hoarding cash out of fear. I looked at the balance. $11,000. I looked at my savings account. I had $60,000 now. I clicked Pay in Full. The screen flashed green. Congratulations. Your loan is paid off. I sat back in my chair and laughed. It was a manic, giddy sound. I was debt-free. I was 23 years old, debt-free, and making 6 figures. I sold the beat-up sedan. I went to a dealership and bought a 3-year-old Subaru. It had heated seats and a sunroof. It didn't smell like old gym socks. I drove it off the lot with the windows down, blasting music, feeling the wind whip through my hair. I booked a weekend trip for Noah and me to a cabin in the Cascades. We hiked. We drank wine by a fire. For 48 hours. I didn't think about Kelsey Hart once. I was safe. I was happy. I had won. We returned on a Sunday evening. The rain was lashing against the windows of my apartment, but inside it was warm. Noah was in the shower. I was unpacking my bag, humming a song. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I didn't think anything of it. It was probably Marisol sending me a meme or a notification from work. I walked over and picked it up. The screen lit up. The number was not saved in my contacts. But I knew it. I knew the area code. It was the area code of the life I had left behind. It was a landline. It was the number of the house with the hydrangeas and the hidden boxes. My stomach dropped through the floor. The hum of the song died in my throat. My hands instantly went cold. A physiological reaction that bypassed my brain entirely. Ignore it. I told myself, it is a wrong number. It is a telemarketer using a spoofed number. I pressed the side button, silencing the call. I put the phone face down. My heart was hammering against my ribs, hard and fast, a rabbit trying to kick its way out of a cage. Noah turned off the shower water. I heard him whistling. You are Ella Perez. I thought, you are the lead strategist. You are safe. The phone buzzed again. I stared at the back of the case. It was persistent. It was aggressive. I picked it up. Same number. I declined it. My breathing was shallow. Why were they calling? They didn't have this number. I had changed everything. I was unlisted. Unless something had happened, the mind is a traitor, even after everything they did. The first instinct was panic. Is Mom hurt? Did Dad have a heart attack? Then the second instinct kicked in, suspicion. They only call when they want something. The phone stopped buzzing. I stood in the kitchen, paralyzed. I should block the number. I should throw the phone into the ocean. It buzzed a third time. I looked at the screen. It wasn't the landline this time. It was a cell phone number. I recognized the last 4 digits. 5589. Evan, my baby brother. The one who watched me pack. The one who knew about the box and said nothing. My thumb hovered over the red button, but then I remembered his face that last night. The fear, the cowardice, yes, but also the trapped look in his eyes. If Evan was calling me, he was breaking the rules. My father would never allow him to reach out to the traitor. Something was wrong. I slid my thumb across the green icon. I put the phone to my ear. I didn't say anything. I just listened to the static on the other end. There was a ragged breathing sound. Someone was hyperventilating. Ella, the voice whispered. It was thin and trembling. It sounded like he was hiding in a closet. I didn't answer. I held the phone tight enough to crack the screen. Ella, please, Evan said, his voice cracking into a sob. I know you are there. I found your number on an old email you sent to Grandma. Please don't hang up. I found my voice. It was cold. Metallic. What do you want? Evan. Oh, God. Thank God. He cried. You have to listen. It is Dad. What about him? I asked. Is he sick? I almost hoped he was. It would be cleaner. No, Evan said. He is not sick. He is in trouble. Big trouble. And he is dragging us all down with him. I looked around my beautiful, safe apartment. I looked at the rain hitting the glass. That sounds like a personal problem. Evan, I said, I don't live there anymore. You don't understand, Evan hissed. The desperation in his voice was palpable now. The police were here. Ella. They took his laptop. They froze the accounts. Mom is losing her mind. She is talking about finding you. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Finding me, I repeated. They need money, Evan said. They need a lot of money. And they know you have a job. They saw your LinkedIn. Someone showed them. They are coming for you. Ella, you have to be ready. The bathroom door opened. Noah walked out, a towel around his waist, steam billowing behind him. Hey, is everything okay? He asked. Seeing my face, I held up a hand, silencing him. Why are you calling me? Evan, I asked. Why warn me? You chose your side. Silence. Then, a whisper so quiet, I almost missed it. Because I am next, he said. If they can't get to you, they are going to use me to pay the debt. Please, Ella, I am scared. I closed my eyes. The peace of the weekend evaporated. The high of the promotion crumbled. The game had changed. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were hunting. I opened my eyes. I looked at Noah, who was looking at me with concern. I looked at the Rising Star printout on the counter. Keep talking. I said to Evan, tell me everything. The silence in my Seattle apartment was heavy, but it was no longer the silence of peace. It was the silence of a held breath before a crash. Rain lashed against the window pane, blurring the city lights into streaks of gray and gold. But I was focused entirely on the voice trembling in my ear. Tell me everything, I had said. Evan let out a ragged exhale, the sound of a boy who had been holding his breath for months. It is Dad's company, Evan said, his voice dropping so low I had to press the phone hard against my ear to hear him. You know how he manages those condo associations in the next county. The police, they have a warrant. They are saying he moved money. They are saying he took funds from the maintenance reserves to cover bad investments in commercial real estate. It is bad. Ella, it is federal. I felt a cold, sharp pang of validation. I was not surprised. My father had always treated money like a fluid concept, something that existed to serve his immediate image rather than reality. He had stolen my graduation money to buy a cooler and steak. It was not a far leap to stealing from clients to buy the illusion of success. How much? I asked. I slipped instantly into analyst mode. The emotion was there, burning at the edges, but the core of me was cold calculation. They are saying nearly $200,000 is missing, Evan whispered. The accounts are frozen, all of them. The business accounts, the personal joint accounts. Mom went to the grocery store yesterday and her card was declined for a gallon of milk. She came home and just screamed. I have never heard her scream like that. I looked at Noah. He was leaning against the kitchen island, his arms crossed, his face tight with worry. He could hear the tinny distortion of Evan's panic. And Brooke? I asked. Can't she help? She has been working at that boutique for 2 years. Evan let out a humorless, choked laugh. Brooke got fired 3 weeks ago. She got caught taking inventory. She is back living in her old room. We are all here. Ella, we are all trapped in this house, and the walls are closing in. The lawyer Dad called, he wants a retainer of $15,000 just to look at the case. We don't have $15, let alone $15,000. So you called me, I said. My voice was flat. We didn't know what else to do, Evan said. Mom remembered your job. She remembered you were the valedictorian. She said you must be doing well. She said, he hesitated. She said what? Evan? She said we are family. He rushed out. She said that whatever happened at graduation was just a misunderstanding, that we were all stressed, that if you knew how bad things were, you would come home. You would help us figure this out. You are the smart one. Right. You understand the numbers. I closed my eyes. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a physical blow. They had erased me when I was an inconvenience, and now they wanted to resurrect me because I was an asset. They did not want a daughter. They wanted a liquidity provider. They wanted a forensic accountant who would work for free. A misunderstanding, I repeated. Is that what we are calling it now? Leaving your daughter in a parking lot while you eat ice cream is a misunderstanding. Ella, please, Evan begged. Don't do this. Not now. Dad could go to jail. We could lose the house. Mom is falling apart. She cries all day. She keeps saying she wishes you were here. I gripped the phone. Does she wish I was there? Or does she wish my bank account was there? Does it matter? Evan snapped, his fear momentarily turning into the defensive anger I knew so well. We are drowning. You are out there living some perfect life, judging us. You owe us. Ella, they raised you. They fed you. I paid them back, I said coldly. I paid them back by leaving so they wouldn't have to look at their failure anymore. I took a breath. I needed to know. I needed to hear it from him. Evan, I have one question, and the answer will determine if I hang up this phone and change my number again, or if I keep listening. What? He breathed. Are you calling me because you miss your sister? I asked. Are you calling because you have wondered for 6 months if I was dead or alive? Or are you calling because you need someone to sign a check? The silence on the other end was absolute. It stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. In that silence, the last thread of hope I didn't even know I was holding finally snapped. If he missed me, he would have said it immediately. He would have shouted it, but he hesitated. He was calculating. He was trying to figure out which answer would unlock the money. We need the check, Ella, he whispered finally. But Mom says it is more than that. She says she has been worried sick. She says she has been looking for you everywhere. Looking for me? I asked. I have not received a single email, not a single call to my old friends. She couldn't tell people the truth, Evan blurted out. She couldn't tell people you just walked out. It would look bad. It would look like we drove you away. My stomach twisted. So what did she tell them? Evan didn't answer. Evan, I commanded. What is the story? She tells people you are sick, he mumbled. She tells the neighbors. The church group, she says you had a mental break after graduation, that the pressure was too much. She says you ran away because you were unstable. She says you are probably on drugs or living on the street. She has people praying for you every Sunday. She plays the grieving mother. Ella, she cries and tells them how hard she tried to get you help. The room seemed to tilt. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had murdered my character. They had taken my strength, my resilience, my intelligence, my independence, and twisted it into a pathology. To protect their image as good parents, they had painted me as a mentally unstable addict who abandoned a loving home. They were not just looking for money. They were using my tragedy to garner sympathy and, knowing them, probably donations. I see, I said. My voice was no longer flat. It was ice. Thank you. Evan, wait, he cried. What are you going to do? Are you coming home? Can you send the money? I am not coming home, I said. And Evan, if you call this number again, I will block you. If you give this number to Dad, I will change it. You made your choice in the boat that day. You are making it again now. Ella, wait. I ended the call. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand. My hand was shaking violently, but not from sorrow. It was the shaking of a soldier who has just realized the war is not over. It has just moved to a new front. Noah walked over and gently pried the phone from my fingers. He set it on the counter and pulled me into his arms. I didn't cry. I felt rigid, vibrating with a high-frequency rage. "They said I was crazy," I whispered into his chest. "They told everyone I had a mental breakdown. They are using pity for my condition to cover up their neglect." Noah pulled back and looked at me. His hazel eyes were hard. "That is not just a lie, Ella. That is destruction. If that gets back to your employer, if that gets out in a background check." He didn't have to finish the sentence. I worked in data security. I worked in high-level analytics. If there was a rumor that I was unstable, or a runaway, or an addict, my security clearance could be pulled. My credibility would be shattered. They are not just asking for help, I realized. They are holding my reputation hostage. I pulled away from Noah and walked to my laptop. I opened it. "What are you doing?" Noah asked. "I am checking the data," I said. "Evan is a coward, but he is not a creative liar. If he says Mom is spinning a story, the story is out there. I need to see the blast radius." I navigated to the website of my hometown's local newspaper. I searched for my father's name first. There it was. A small article in the business section, published 3 days ago. Local property manager under investigation for financial irregularities. It was vague, citing discrepancies in escrow accounts. It was bad, but it wasn't front-page news yet. Then, I searched for my mother's name on Facebook. Her profile was private, but Aunt Sheila's was not. And Aunt Sheila tagged my mother in everything. I scrolled back 6 months. June 23rd. A photo of my mother looking haggard and teary-eyed at a church luncheon. The caption read, "Please keep my sister Elaine in your prayers. Her heart is broken over Kelsey's disappearance. It is so hard when a child rejects God and family. We are praying for her safety and that she finds her way back from the dark path she is on." August 10th. A post about a support group for parents of estranged children. My mother was tagged. The comment from a neighbor read, "Elaine, you are a saint for how you handled her episodes. We all saw how difficult she was. Stay strong." October 5th. A GoFundMe link shared by Aunt Sheila. Title, "Help the Hearts Navigate a Family Crisis." The description was vague, mentioning unexpected legal and medical costs associated with a missing family member. It had raised $2,000. I stared at the screen. The air left my lungs. They were raising money on my name. They were insinuating that the legal costs, which were definitely for my father's fraud, were somehow related to searching for me or dealing with my medical issues. "They are monetizing me," I said. I pointed at the screen. Noah leaned over my shoulder. He read the posts, and I felt his body tense up. "This is fraud," Noah said. His voice was low and dangerous. "They are soliciting donations based on a lie, and they are defaming you to cover their tracks." I navigated to the comments section of the GoFundMe. Nancy W. wrote, "So sad to hear about Kelsey. She seemed like such a bright girl. Drugs are a terrible demon. Hope you find her." Pastor Jim wrote, "The church is with you. Elaine, the prodigal daughter, will return when she hits rock bottom." Rock bottom. I looked around my apartment with its view of the Sound. I looked at the Subaru key on the counter. I looked at the promotion letter pinned to my fridge. I was at the peak of my life, and they had the entire town convinced I was in a gutter. "I have to go back," I said. "No," Noah said immediately. "Absolutely not. That is what they want. They want you to show up so they can guilt you, trap you, and drain your accounts. You are not going back there to be their savior." "I am not going back to save them," I said. I turned the laptop around so he could see the drugs comment. "I am going back to save my name. If I stay here and ignore this, this narrative becomes the truth. If a background checker calls my hometown, this is what they will hear. If I ever want to run for office or get a higher clearance, this will be the file on me." I stood up and paced the small living room. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the cold, hard clarity that had gotten me through the graduation night. I need to call Marisol, I said. 10 minutes later, Marisol was in my apartment. She took one look at the Facebook posts and let out a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. "This is war," she said, slamming her hand on the counter. "This isn't just toxic family drama. Ella, this is a calculated campaign to destroy your credibility so that if you ever speak out against them, no one will believe you. It is preemptive discrediting." "Exactly," I said. "They knew I might talk eventually, so they made sure that if I did, I would look like the crazy, bitter daughter." "So what is the play?" Noah asked. He was sitting on the arm of the sofa, watching me intensely. "You can't just walk in there and scream. They will just say, 'See, she is hysterical.'" "I need a lawyer," I said. "Not a family lawyer. I need a defamation lawyer. And I need a forensic accountant to trace that GoFundMe money." "I have a cousin," Marisol said instantly. "He is in corporate litigation. He eats bullies for breakfast. I will text him right now." "And I need proof," I said. "I have the texts from graduation. I have the photo of the check. But I need more. I need to prove that they didn't just misunderstand me, but that they are actively lying about my location and my mental state." I looked at the phone on the counter. "I need Evan," I said. "He just tried to shake you down." Noah pointed out. "Yes," I said. "But he is terrified. He thinks he is next. And he is right. If Dad goes down, he will throw Evan under the bus to soften the landing. Dad will blame the stress on Evan, or say Evan mishandled the books if he ever helped out at the office." I picked up the phone. I didn't dial. I just held it. "I am not going to beg for their love anymore," I said quietly. "I spent 22 years trying to be good enough for them to keep. Now I am going to be the nightmare they can't get rid of." "Self-defense," Noah corrected me. He walked over and put his hands on my shoulders. "Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This is self-defense. They are attacking your future. You have the right to protect it." "Self-defense," I repeated. It tasted better. It tasted clean. "I am going to build a case," I said. "I am going to document every lie. I am going to download every Facebook post before they delete them. I am going to get affidavits from my university professors stating I was perfectly sane and successful. And when I have a stack of paper 3 inches thick, I am going to walk into that house." "And if they ask for money?" Marisol asked. I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I will give them something better than money," I said. "I will give them a choice. They can face the FBI for the fraud, or they can face me for the defamation. But they don't get to keep the money and the victimhood." I sat back down at the computer. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Operation Reclaim. "Noah," I said, "can you look up property records in Florida? I want to see if the house is leveraged." "On it," he said, opening his own laptop without hesitation. "Marisol," I said, "get your cousin on the phone. Ask him what the statute of limitations is for theft of mail and fraud." "With pleasure," she said. The rain continued to hammer against the glass. But I wasn't cold anymore. I was burning with purpose. They had forgotten my graduation. They had forgotten my value. But they had forgotten the most important thing of all. They had raised me to be a survivor. And they were about to find out just how well they had done their job. I sat in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of Marcus Vega's law firm, watching the rain streak against the window. Marcus was Marisol's cousin, a man with a suit as sharp as his reputation for destroying corporate bullies. But today, he was looking at a credit report with a frown that made my stomach turn. He slid the paper across the mahogany table toward me. "Look at page 3, he said. I looked. My eyes scanned the lines of data student loans marked paid in full. The car loan for my Subaru, and then, at the bottom, a new entry, a credit card, issued by a bank I did not bank with, opened 14 days ago. The limit was $5,000. The current balance was $4,950. I did not open this, I said. My voice was calm. but it was the calm of a person watching a house burn down. Marcus nodded. I assumed as much. The billing address is in Florida. It is your parents' house. They used your social security number, which they obviously have on file, to open a line of credit. They maxed it out in under 2 weeks. I stared at the number. $5,000. They were not just asking Evan to call me for help. They were already stealing from me. They had resurrected the financial identity of Kelsey Hart solely to loot it. This is identity theft, Marcus said. It is a federal crime. We can file a police report today. But Ella, this is just the tip of the iceberg. He opened a folder on his laptop and turned the screen toward me. We ran a sweep of your name in their local area, he said. We wanted to see the extent of the defamation. He clicked on a link. It was a newsletter for the Grace Community Church. The church my parents attended only on Easter and Christmas when they wanted to be seen. I read the highlighted paragraph under the prayer requests section. Please donate to the Hart Family Emergency Fund. George and Elaine are currently navigating a tragic situation with their eldest daughter, who has gone missing following a severe mental health crisis. The family is working with specialists to locate her and get her the residential treatment she needs. Checks can be made out to the Hart Family Trust. I felt the blood drain from my face. Residential treatment. They were implying I was in rehab. They were implying I was insane. They are collecting money. I whispered, they are using my disappearance as a fundraising gala. It gets worse, Marcus said. He clicked another tab. This was an email. It had been forwarded to me by the Alumni Association of the High School Honor Society I had been president of. The subject line read, Inquiry regarding Kelsey Hart. The body of the email was from my mother, to whom it may concern. I am writing to ask if the Honor Society has any emergency grants for alumni. As you know, Kelsey was a star student, but the pressure was too much for her. We are trying to raise funds to hire a private investigator to bring her home before she hurts herself. Any contribution would honor her past achievements. I stood up. I walked to the window. I felt sick. Physically, violently sick. For years. They had hidden my awards. They had shoved my certificates into a box in the attic because my success made them feel small. They had called me arrogant. They had ignored my graduation. But now that they were broke, suddenly my achievements were useful. They were parading my resume around town, using the very excellence they despised to solicit pity and cash. They were selling a story of a fallen genius because it paid better than the truth. This is not just defamation, Marcus said behind me. This is wire fraud. They are soliciting funds under false pretenses across state lines. I turned back to him. I want to burn it down. I said, I don't want a settlement. I want them exposed. We need more, Marcus said. We need to prove that they know you are safe and are lying anyway. The texts from Evan are good, but a jury could see that as hearsay. We need a smoking gun. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Evan. I had not blocked him yet. I had left the channel open, hoping his cowardice would turn into usefulness. There was no text, just an image. I tapped it. It was a photo of a document sitting on my father's desk. The lighting was bad, taken in haste, but the title was legible. Petition for Emergency Guardianship. I zoomed in. Petitioner Elaine Hart. Subject Kelsey Hart. Reason adult incapacitation. Subject lacks the capacity to manage financial or personal affairs due to acute psychological distress and abandonment of domicile. My knees gave out. I sat back down in the leather chair, the phone shaking in my hand. Guardianship. Like Britney Spears. They weren't just trying to steal $5,000 on a credit card. They were trying to take away my legal personhood. If they got a judge to sign this, and in a small town where my father played golf with the judges, they would gain control of my assets. They would gain control of the trust fund I had emptied. They could legally force me back to Florida. They wanted to own me. Why, I asked. My voice sounded thin. Why go this far? Marcus looked at the photo. His face hardened into a mask of legal fury. Because of the money you took, he said, the $22,000 from your grandfather. If they declare you incompetent, they can argue that you stole that money in a manic episode. They can petition the bank to reverse the wire transfer. They are trying to claw back the cash you used to escape. A second text came from Evan. They are filing this on Monday. Dad says once they have the order, they can get the police in Seattle to pick you up. I looked at Noah, who was sitting in the corner of the room. He looked ready to punch a wall. They know I am in Seattle, I said. That is the other thing, Marcus said. He looked at Marisol, who had been sitting quietly next to him. Marisol took a deep breath. Ella, something happened yesterday. What I asked, I got a call at the school. She said, it was a woman. She sounded frantic. She said she was your sister. She said there was a medical emergency and she needed to reach you. But you weren't answering. She was crying. Ella, it was a performance. She asked for your address. She asked if I knew where you worked. My heart stopped. Brooke, I didn't give her anything, Marisol said quickly. I told her I couldn't release personal information and hung up. But Ella, she called my work line. That means they researched you. They found out who your friends are. They are building a map of your life. I felt a violation so deep it felt like a physical assault. I had built a fortress. I had moved 3,000 miles. I had changed my name. And they had clawed their way in, not with love, but with lies and social engineering. They were not going to let me go. They were like an infection that refused to be treated. I looked at the phone. I looked at the photo of the guardianship paper. The fear vanished. It was replaced by a cold, sharp determination. It was the same feeling I had when I fixed the data model at work. I saw the variables, I saw the outcome, and I knew exactly which lever to pull. I picked up my burner phone. I dialed Evan. He answered on the first ring. Did you get it? He whispered. I did. I said, I saw the papers. Evan, I didn't know they were going to do that. He stammered. I just saw it on the desk. Ella, you have to run. You have to go somewhere else. No. I said, I am done running. I looked at Marcus. He gave me a nod. Evan, listen to me very carefully. I said, I am putting a lawyer on the line. We are recording this call. What Evan squeaked. No. Don't shut up and listen, I commanded. My voice was the voice of the lead strategist now. Mom and Dad have committed identity theft. They have committed wire fraud. And with this guardianship petition, they are attempting perjury. I have the credit report. I have the emails to the scholarship fund. And thanks to you, I have the picture of the petition. I heard Evan breathing fast. If I go to the police right now, I said, Dad goes to prison, Mom goes to prison, and you? You are an accessory. You knew about the fraud and you said nothing. You helped them hide it. No. Evan cried. I am helping you. I sent the picture. That buys you nothing if you don't go on the record. I said, I waited a beat. I let the silence weigh on him. Here's the deal. Evan, I am going to give you a choice. A binary choice. 0 or 1. Choice A. You hang up. I file the police report. I sue the family for everything they have left. Which is nothing. You get dragged into it. You lose your college fund. Oh wait, they probably stole that too. You go down with the ship. I heard him whimper. Choice B. You turn witness. You go into that living room, right now, and you record a conversation. You get them to admit that I am not missing. You get them to admit that the mental health crisis is a lie to get donations. You get them to admit that the guardianship is a strategy to get the money back. I can't, he whispered. Dad will kill me. Dad is going to jail. Evan, I said, the only question is whether you are visiting him or bunking with him. I looked at the rain outside. If you send me that recording, I said, I will pay for your first semester of college. I will get you an apartment in a different state. I will help you get out. It was a bribe. I knew it. But I was dealing with mercenaries. I had to speak their language. You would do that, he asked. I am the only one in this family who keeps her promises. I said. There was a long silence. I could hear the television in the background on his end. I could hear the muffled sound of my mother's voice. How do I do it? Evan asked. His voice was steady now, the voice of a rat leaving a sinking ship. Download a voice recorder app. I said, put your phone in your shirt pocket, walk into the kitchen. Ask Mom why she told the church I was on drugs when she knows I have a job in Seattle. Ask Dad why he signed my name on a credit card application. Play dumb. Let them explain the crime to you. And then email the file to me and pack your bags. I said, because once I have that file, I am pulling the trigger. I hung up. Marcus looked at me. That was brutal. He said, it was necessary. I replied. I sat back and waited. The clock on the wall ticked. I thought about the girl in the parking lot. The girl in the blue gown. She would have been horrified by what I just did. She would have thought it was cruel to corner her brother like that. But Ella Perez knew the truth. Cruelty is missing a graduation. Cruelty is stealing a future. Cruelty is telling the world your daughter is insane so you can pay off your bad debts. What I was doing wasn't cruelty, it was an audit, and I was about to balance the books. 30 minutes later, my email chimed. Subject conversation. MP3. Attachment size, 14 megabytes. I looked at Noah. I looked at Marisol. I looked at Marcus. Play it, Noah said. I clicked the file. The audio was crackly at first, then clear. Evan's voice. Mom, I saw the church newsletter. Why did you say Ella is on drugs? People are asking me if she is in rehab. Mom's voice clear. Annoyed. Keep your voice down. It is a narrative. Evan, people don't donate money for a daughter who is just ungrateful. They donate for a tragedy. If we want to save this house, we need a tragedy. Evan. But she isn't sick. She is working in Seattle. We know where she is. Dad's voice heavy, angry. She is sick in the head for abandoning us. She stole $20,000 that belonged to this family. If we have to bend the truth to get a judge to sign those papers and get our money back, then that is what we do. It is just paperwork. Once we have the guardianship, we can freeze her accounts and transfer it back. She owes us. Evan. What about the credit card? The one in her name, Dad. She won't notice. And if she does, who are they going to believe? The loving parents or the runaway druggie? Now stop asking questions and go mow the lawn. The recording ended. The room was silent. That is it, Marcus said softly. He closed his eyes and exhaled. That is the ball game. Intent to defraud, admission of perjury, admission of defamation. I looked at the laptop. I felt a strange emptiness. I had won. I had the weapon that would destroy them. But I didn't feel happy. I felt a profound, aching grief for the parents I never had. The parents on that recording were monsters. They were caricatures of selfishness. I stood up. File it. I said to Marcus, file everything. The police report for the identity theft, the cease and desist for the defamation, the restraining order, and the lawsuit Marcus asked. I looked out at the city of Seattle. Sue them. I said, sue them for every penny they raised on my name. Sue them for the emotional distress. Sue them until they don't have a house to hide in. I turned to Noah. I am ready to tell my story now. I said, not the version they wrote, my version. I opened a new browser tab. I logged into my LinkedIn. I had 5,000 connections. I began to type. To my network, I have recently been made aware of a fundraising campaign regarding my health and safety. It was time to light the match. Revenge is not a Molotov cocktail thrown through a window. Real revenge is a stack of paperwork filed in triplicate. It is a series of notarized signatures. It is the quiet, humming machinery of the law doing exactly what it was designed to do, transfer power from the careless to the competent. 2 days after I received the recording from Evan, I sat in Marcus's office again. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle scrubbed clean and bright. But my mood was gray. I was done reacting. I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive, and I was going to do it with the precision of a surgeon. We are going to form a limited liability company, Marcus said, typing on his laptop. We will call it Perez Holdings. LLC. It is generic. It is boring. It sounds like 1,000 other shell companies that buy distressed assets every day. Why, I asked. Because we need a shield. He explained. If you buy assets in your own name, the public record will show Ella Perez. If Perez Holdings buys them, the owner is just a corporate entity. The signatories are private. You are the sole member. But on paper, you are invisible. I nodded. Do it. We filed the papers that afternoon. It cost $200. With a few keystrokes, I became a corporate entity. I was no longer just a daughter. I was an institution. While Marcus handled the incorporation, Noah handled the reconnaissance. He had been digging through the county clerk's records in Florida for 48 hours. Fueled by coffee and righteous indignation, he walked into the living room that evening, his laptop open. You were right to be suspicious, he said. He turned the screen toward me. It was a foreclosure notice. Your father hasn't paid the mortgage in 9 months, Noah said. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings in January. They managed to delay it with some legal maneuvering, probably using the last of their savings. But the clock ran out. The house is scheduled for a judicial auction next Tuesday. I stared at the document. The date of the first missed payment aligned almost perfectly with the time they started planning my graduation lake trip. They were already drowning then. They had spent money on a cooler and steaks while the roof over their heads was being repossessed. And the fraud. The fundraising. It was a desperate attempt to stop this bleeding. They weren't trying to get rich. They were trying to stay indoors. It is going to auction. I repeated. Yes, Noah said. The opening bid is set at the remaining principal balance plus legal fees, $185,000. I looked at the number. The market value of the house was easily $350,000. But at an auction, cash is king, and distress lowers the price. I have $80,000 in savings now, I said, doing the mental math. Between the signing bonus, the unspent trust fund, and my salary. I had been hoarding cash like a dragon. I can get a hard money loan for the rest. I said, my credit score is 780. I have a high-income job. I can buy it. Noah looked at me. You want to buy your parents' house? I don't want to live in it, I said, my voice cold. I want to own it. There is a difference. I spent the next 3 days in a frenzy of financial engineering. I secured a bridge loan from a private lender who specialized in investment properties. The interest rate was high 9%, but I didn't care. I planned to refinance immediately. I used Perez Holdings, LLC, as the borrower. On Tuesday morning, I didn't go to work. I sat at my dining table in Seattle, logged into the county sheriff's auction site. The listing came up at 10 o'clock Pacific time. Property address, 42 Oak Creek Drive. Occupancy status occupied. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew that house. I knew the squeak of the third step. I knew the smell of the attic. And now, it was just item number 47B on a government website. The bidding opened. $185,000. I clicked bid. Counter bid from an investor. $190,000. I didn't hesitate. $195,000. $200,000. I looked at my spreadsheet. My ceiling was $220,000. That was the maximum I could leverage without putting myself in danger. $205,000. The screen refreshed. Bidder 765 leads. I waited. The timer counted down. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. I clicked again. $210,000. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Sold. I sat back in my chair, the adrenaline crashing out of my system and leaving me shaking. I had just bought my childhood home for $210,000. I owned the roof over their heads. I owned the walls where they hung the pictures of everyone but me. I owned the driveway where they had parked the car to hide from me. I picked up the phone and called Marcus. We have the asset, I said. Good, Marcus replied. Now we launched the second missile. The second missile was a lawsuit. It was a 40-page complaint filed in federal court, citing diversity of jurisdiction since I lived in Washington and they lived in Florida. Plaintiff Ella Perez, defendants George Hart, Elaine Hart, causes of action identity theft, wire fraud, defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We attached the exhibits, the credit report showing the fraudulent card, the email soliciting donations for a missing person, the recording of them conspiring to commit perjury to get a guardianship. I am not just suing for damages. I told Marcus, I want an injunction. I want a court order forcing them to take down every post, return every donation, and issue a public retraction to the church and the community. And the house Marcus asked. I looked at the deed transfer that was currently being processed digitally. Draft a lease agreement, I said, standard month to month, market rate. $2,500 a month, and draft an eviction notice for non-payment, dated for 3 days after I arrive, because we both know they don't have the money. I was not kicking them out into the street immediately. That would be illegal. I was doing everything by the book. I was becoming their landlord. If they wanted to stay, they could pay me. If they couldn't pay, they would leave through the legal process, just like any other tenant who failed to uphold their end of a contract. Wednesday night. My phone buzzed. It was Evan again. He had been quiet for a few days, presumably trying to act normal while living in a house that was about to implode. Evan, you need to know what they are planning. They have a meeting with the family lawyer tomorrow. They are going to tell him that you have been spotted in Seattle, but you are mentally incompetent. They are going to ask him to help them get an emergency order to transport you back to Florida for treatment. I read the text. It was the final validation. They were not stopping. They were doubling down. They were planning to kidnap me legally. Evan's mom said, "Once we get her here, we will take her phone and keep her in the guest room until she signs the release for the trust fund. They talk about you like you are a stray dog they need to leash." I typed back, "Ella, stay out of the house on Friday afternoon. Go to the library. Go to a friend's house. Just don't be there at 4 o'clock. Evan, why what is happening? Ella, consequences. I booked my flight. I didn't fly into the regional airport near my hometown. I flew into Orlando. 2 hours away. I didn't want anyone to see my name on a passenger manifest. I rented a car, a gray sedan, indistinguishable from 1,000 other cars on the road. I booked a hotel room in the next town over. I didn't call my old friends. I didn't post on social media. I moved like a ghost. Thursday night. Noah drove me to SeaTac Airport. He pulled up to the curb, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I should be going with you," he said for the 10th time. "I don't like you facing them alone. They are desperate. Ella, desperate people are dangerous." I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to him. "I know you want to protect me," I said, "and I love you for it. But if you come, they will look at you. They will think you are the one pulling the strings. They will think I am just a weak girl hiding behind a strong man." I touched his cheek. "I need them to see me. Noah, I need them to see that the power isn't coming from a boyfriend or a lawyer. It is coming from the daughter they underestimated. I need to stand in that doorway alone." He looked at me, searching my eyes. He saw the resolve there. He saw the steel that had been forged in the fire of their neglect. "Okay," he whispered, "but keep your phone on, and if you don't text me by 5 o'clock on Friday, I am calling the police. Deal," I said. I kissed him, grabbed my bag, and walked into the terminal. The flight was a blur. I reviewed the documents on my tablet the entire way. The lease, the deed, the lawsuit, the evidence. I landed in Florida on Friday morning. The humidity hit me the moment I stepped out of the airport doors, that heavy, wet heat that used to feel like home and now felt like a suffocating blanket. I drove the 2 hours in silence. I didn't listen to music. I rehearsed the conversation. I kept my heart rate steady. I breathed in for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. I checked into the hotel at 1 o'clock. I changed my clothes. I didn't wear jeans. I didn't wear a hoodie. I put on my armor, a tailored navy blazer, high-waisted trousers, heels that clicked with authority on the pavement. I pulled my hair back into a severe, sleek bun. I looked in the mirror. Kelsey Hart, the girl with the frizzy hair and the apologetic smile, was nowhere to be seen. The woman in the mirror was Ella Perez, CEO of Perez Holdings, lead strategist at Northlight Metrics. I drove to the house. It was 3:50 in the afternoon. The neighborhood was quiet. The hydrangeas in Mrs. Gable's yard were blooming blue and purple. I pulled the rental car up to the curb, but I didn't park in the driveway. The driveway belonged to the tenant. I parked on the street. I sat in the car for a moment. I looked at the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. When you are a child, your trauma feels like a castle, massive and impenetrable. But looking at it now, through the eyes of an adult who owned property and paid taxes, it was just a suburban ranch house with peeling paint and a lawn that needed mowing. It wasn't a castle, it was just a building, and I held the piece of paper that said it was mine. I picked up my leather briefcase. It contained 3 folders. Folder A, the lawsuit. Folder B, the evidence. The recording, the emails, the credit report. Folder C, the lease agreement and notice of ownership. I stepped out of the car. The heat pressed against my suit. I walked up the walkway. I remembered walking down this path on graduation night, carrying my diploma, feeling like the loneliest person in the world. I remembered the porch light buzzing. Today, the porch light was off. I checked my watch. 4 o'clock. Evan should be gone. My father would be home. He wasn't working since the investigation started. My mother would be there. Brooke would likely be there. Sulking. I walked up the 3 steps. I stood in front of the door. The paint was chipped near the handle. I didn't knock. I didn't use a key, even though I technically had the legal right to change the locks. I rang the doorbell. Ding dong. The sound echoed inside. I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps. My father. I squared my shoulders. I lifted my chin. I tightened my grip on the briefcase handle. The lock turned. The door opened. My father stood there. He was wearing a stained t-shirt and gym shorts. He looked older. His face was puffy. His eyes red-rimmed. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. He blinked at me. For a second, he didn't recognize the woman in the power suit. Then, his eyes widened. "Kelsey," he breathed. I looked him dead in the eye. My expression remained perfectly neutral. "Hello, George," I said. I didn't call him Dad. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. Then, a flush of anger replaced the shock. He grabbed my arm, trying to pull me inside. "You," he hissed, "you have some nerve showing up here. Do you know what you have put your mother through? Get inside before the neighbors see you." I pulled my arm back sharply. I didn't step inside. "Don't touch me," I said. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "Who is it?" my mother's voice called from the kitchen. My father turned his head. "It is her. She is back." My mother came running into the hallway. Brooke followed her. They stopped behind my father, staring at me like I was a ghost returning from the dead. "Oh, thank God," my mother cried, instantly launching into her performance. She rushed forward, arms outstretched. "Kelsey." "Oh, my poor baby. You are safe. We have been so worried." She tried to hug me. I took a step back. I held up the briefcase between us like a shield. "Stop," I said. My mother froze. She looked at my face, really looked at it, and the performance faltered. She saw the coldness in my eyes. "What is wrong with you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We are your family." "No," I said. "You are the defendants." I stepped past my father, moving into the foyer not because he invited me, but because I owned the foyer. I walked into the living room and placed the briefcase on the coffee table, the same table where I had found the hidden check. I opened it. I took out the stacks of paper. I laid them out in 3 neat piles. My father slammed the front door and marched into the room. "You listen to me, young lady," he shouted, pointing a finger at my face. "You are going to sit down. You are going to apologize, and then we are going to the bank to fix the mess you made. You stole from this family." I looked at him. I looked at the finger pointing at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I felt pity. "I didn't steal anything," I said calmly. "But you did." I pointed to the first pile. "That is a copy of the federal lawsuit filed yesterday against both of you for identity theft, wire fraud, and defamation. I have the credit card records. George, I have the recording of you admitting to the fraud." My father's face went pale. His hand dropped. "What recording?" he whispered. "The one where you told Evan you were going to force me to sign papers." I said, "The one where you admitted lying to the church." My mother gasped. Evan did that." I ignored her. I pointed to the second pile. This is a cease and desist order. It demands you take down the GoFundMe immediately and return every cent. If you don't, I will add conversion charges to the lawsuit." Brooke spoke up from the doorway, her voice sneering. "So what? You are suing us. We don't have any money. You idiot. You can't get blood from a stone." I looked at my sister. She looked tired and mean. "I know you don't have any money," I said. "That is why the bank foreclosed on this house." The silence that followed was absolute. It sucked the air out of the room. My father grabbed the back of the sofa to steady himself. "How do you know about that?" he rasped. "Because it was a public auction," I said. I picked up the third pile of papers, the deed, the transfer of title, the lease. I held up the document with the county seal. The house was sold on Tuesday. I said, my mother started to cry. "Oh God, we are homeless. They sold it. We have nowhere to go." "You are not homeless yet," I said. I placed the document down. "The company that bought the house is called Perez Holdings, LLC. My father looked at me. His eyes darted from my face to the papers. He was connecting the dots. "Perez. You," he whispered, "you bought it." "I am the sole owner of Perez Holdings," I said. I stood tall. I smoothed my blazer. "I am not your daughter today. I am your landlord." I pushed the lease agreement toward them. "You have two choices," I said. "Option A. You sign this lease. The rent is $2,500 a month. You pay a security deposit. You follow the rules. Or option B. I begin eviction proceedings on Monday. You have 72 hours to vacate." My father looked like he was having a stroke. His face turned purple. "You can't do this," he screamed. "This is my house. I paid for this house for 20 years. You ungrateful little bitch, I will kill you." He lunged toward me. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. "Take one more step." "George," I said, my voice cutting like a razor, "and I will call the police. And unlike you, I have the deed in my hand. You are trespassing on my property." He stopped. He breathed heavily, his fists clenched. But he didn't move. He knew. He looked at the paperwork. He looked at the suit, and he knew he was outmatched. I picked up my briefcase. "I am staying at the Hilton in Orlando." I said, "You can call my lawyer if you have questions about the lease, but don't call me. I am done taking your calls." I looked at my mother, who was sobbing on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow. "You wanted a tragedy for your fundraiser." "Mom," I said softly, "now you have one. You lost your house to the daughter you tried to erase." I turned and walked to the door. I walked out into the humid Florida afternoon. I walked down the steps. I didn't look back. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but my eyes were dry. It was done. The trap was sprung. The power was mine. The morning of the final confrontation, I woke up in my hotel room with a calmness that felt almost surgical. I put on my armor for the last time. It was a charcoal gray suit, tailored to within an inch of its life, paired with stilettos that clicked against the floor like the ticking of a clock counting down. I checked my reflection. There was no trace of the girl who had cried in a parking lot. There was only the CEO of Perez Holdings. I drove to the house at 10 o'clock in the morning. The sun was beating down on the neighborhood, exposing the cracks in the driveway and the weeds choking the flower beds. It looked like a place that was slowly giving up. I walked up the steps and rang the bell. I did not hide. I stood directly in front of the peephole. The door opened. It was not my father this time. It was Brooke. My sister looked like she had aged 5 years in the last 6 months. She was wearing oversized sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. When she saw me, her jaw literally dropped. She didn't move. She just stared at my suit, my hair, the leather portfolio tucked under my arm. She looked at me like I was an alien species she couldn't comprehend. "Ella," she whispered. "Hello, Brooke," I said. My voice was level. "Are Mom and Dad inside?" She didn't answer. She just stepped back, numbly allowing me to pass. The power dynamic had shifted so violently that she couldn't even muster a sneer. I walked into the living room. The air was stale, smelling of old coffee and panic. My parents were sitting at the dining table, surrounded by piles of paper bills, notices, letters. When they looked up and saw me, the blood drained from their faces in unison. It was as if the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "You," my father breathed. He started to stand up, but his legs seemed to fail him. He sank back into the chair. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked to the head of the table. I placed my portfolio on the wood. It made a heavy, authoritative thud. I unzipped it. "We are going to keep this brief," I said. "I have a flight to catch." I laid out the documents, one by one, like a dealer laying out a winning hand of cards. "Exhibit A," I said, placing the credit report on top. "This is a record of the credit card you opened in my name 2 weeks ago. You maxed it out at $5,000. That is identity theft and federal wire fraud." My mother let out a small, strangled noise. "Exhibit B," I continued, laying down the screenshots of the church newsletter and the emails to the scholarship fund. "This is evidence of you soliciting charitable donations under false pretenses. You claimed I was missing. You claimed I was mentally unstable. That is theft by deception and defamation of character." I placed the third document down. It was the photo Evan had sent me. "And Exhibit C," I said, my voice hardening. "The petition for emergency guardianship. You intended to commit perjury to strip me of my rights so you could access a trust fund that no longer belongs to you." My father's face turned a mottled red. "Now see here," he sputtered, trying to find his old bluster. "We were doing what was best for the family. You abandoned us. You left us with nothing." "I left you with your choices," I corrected him. "You chose to commit crimes to cover them up." I reached into the portfolio for the final document, the deed. "And that brings us to the house," I said. I slid the paper across the table. It stopped right in front of my father's shaking hands. "You have been ignoring the foreclosure notices for months," I said. "You thought you could scramble and find a way out, but the bank ran out of patience. The house went to auction on Tuesday." My mother looked at the paper, then up at me, her eyes wide with terror. "Who bought it?" "A company called Perez Holdings, LLC," I said. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. "I am Perez Holdings," I said. "I bought this house for $210,000. Speaking plainly, I am your landlord." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a world shattering. "No," my father gasped. "That is impossible. You can't have that kind of money." "I do," I said. "I have a career. George, I have investments. I have the life you tried to prevent me from having." "You can't do this," my mother wailed, bursting into tears. "You can't kick us out. We are your parents. This is our home. You can't do this to your family." "Family?" I asked. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. "Family doesn't steal my identity. Family doesn't tell the entire town I'm a drug addict. Family doesn't miss my graduation to eat ice cream." "That was a mistake," my mother cried. "We told you. It was the traffic." "Why are you so vindictive?" "Stop lying," a voice said from the hallway. We all turned. Evan was standing there. He looked terrified. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, but he was standing straight. "Evan, be quiet," my father snapped. "No," Evan said. His voice shook, but he didn't back down. He looked at me, then at our parents. "It wasn't traffic. We didn't even try to go. We were at the lake house by 2 o'clock. We sat on the boat and laughed about it." My mother gasped. "Evan." "Tell her the truth," Evan said, tears streaming down his face. "Tell her we did it on purpose because you didn't want Aunt Sheila to feel bad. Tell her you said she was too full of herself and needed to be taken down a peg." The truth hung in the air. Naked and ugly, Evan had finally broken the code of silence. He had confirmed what I had known in my gut for months. It wasn't an accident. It was a sabotage. I looked at Evan. "Thank you," I said softly. I turned back to my parents. They looked small now. defeated. "Here is how this is going to end," I said. "I am offering you two options. There is no option C." I held up two fingers. "Option A," I said. "I walk out of here and drive straight to the police station. I file the report for the identity theft. I hand over the recording of you conspiring to commit fraud. I sue you for the defamation. Dad goes to prison. Mom goes to prison. The house is sold to a stranger, and you are evicted in 3 days." My father flinched as if I had hit him. "Option B," I said. "You sign this settlement agreement right now." I pushed a thick stack of papers toward them. "It states that you admit to the lies. You will issue a written retraction to the church, the scholarship fund, and every person you solicited money from, admitting that I am safe, employed, and sane, and that the fundraising was an error. You will return every cent you collected." I paused to let that sink in. "Furthermore," I said, "you agree to a permanent no-contact order. You will never call me, email me, or look for me again. And regarding the house, you can stay." My mother looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "We can, as tenants," I said coldly. "You will sign a standard lease. The rent is $2,500 a month. If you are late by a single day, I will evict you. If you break the no-contact order, I will evict you. You live here because I allow it, not because you own it." My father stared at the papers. He looked like a man watching his own funeral. "And one more thing," I said. I looked at Evan. "Evan leaves with me." "What?" my mother whispered. "Evan is 18, I said. "If he wants to go, he goes. And if he comes with me, I will pay for his trade school. I will help him get set up, but he has to get out of this toxic environment." I looked at my brother. "It is your choice. Evan, you can stay here and drown with them, or you can come with me and learn how to swim." Evan didn't hesitate. He walked across the room and stood next to me. "I am going," he said. My father looked at the papers, then at me. He picked up a pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. "This is humiliating," he muttered. "Yes," I said. "It is. But unlike the humiliation you put me through, this is private. Unless you refuse to sign, then I will make it very, very public." He signed. My mother signed, weeping silently onto the pages. Brooke just stood in the corner, watching, realizing that her allies had just surrendered unconditionally. I took the papers. I checked the signatures. I notarized them with the stamp I had brought, making them official. I put everything back into my portfolio. "The rent is due on the 1st, I said. "You can mail the check to Perez Holdings. Do not write a personal note. I will burn it." I turned to go. Evan was already at the door, holding a duffel bag he must have packed while I was talking. "Ella," my mother called out. Her voice was weak. "We just wanted you to be humble." I stopped. I turned around one last time. I looked at the house that had been my prison, and the people who had been my wardens. "I am not humble," I said. "I am excellent, and you never knew the difference." I walked to the door. "And one last thing," I said. "Kelsey Hart is dead. Do not look for her. She doesn't exist anymore." "Then who are you?" my father whispered. "I am Ella Perez," I said, "and I am the one who won." I walked out the door. Evan followed me. We walked down the driveway to my rental car. The sun was still shining, but the air felt lighter. The humidity didn't feel suffocating anymore. It just felt like weather. We got into the car. Evan looked at me. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. I saw the closed door. I saw the drawn curtains. I saw a past that could no longer touch me. "Yes," I said. "I am." I started the car. "Where are we going?" Evan asked. "To the airport." I said, "I have a life to get back to, and you have a life to start." I drove away. I didn't look back. Returning to Seattle felt like waking up from a long, feverish dream. When I walked into my apartment, Noah was waiting. He didn't ask how it went. He just saw the look on my face, the exhaustion, but also the peace. and he hugged me. "It is done," I whispered. "It is done." He agreed. I stood at my window, looking out at the Puget Sound. The ferries were still cutting across the water. The mountains were still there. My job was still there. My name was on the lease. My name was on the door. I realized then that revenge wasn't about making them suffer. Their suffering was inevitable. It was the result of their own choices. Revenge was simply refusing to let their choices destroy me. Revenge was being happy. Revenge was being whole. I was Ella Perez. And for the first time in 23 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that parking lot to this apartment, and I am grateful you stuck with me through every twist and turn. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a rainy city like Seattle, or somewhere sunny? Let me know in the comments below. And tell me, do you think I was too hard on them, or did they get exactly what they deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and give this video a like. And if you really want to help this story get heard by more people, go ahead and smash that hype button. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, and remember you define your own worth.